At my promotion ceremony to lieutenant colonel, my mother stood up and screamed, "She doesn't deserve this rank! It's all bullsh**T!" The entire auditorium of 200 military personnel and families froze in complete silence. I was 3 steps away from shaking Colonel Martinez's hand when my perfect promotion day shattered. My mother, Rebecca Taylor, rose from her seat in the family section and unleashed the words I'd been dreading my entire military career. "Women shouldn't be in combat roles. The military has gone woke," she continued, her voice echoing through the ceremony hall at Fort Devens. The sea of dress uniforms turned to stare. Camera phones swiveled toward her like weapons. Colonel Martinez's outstretched hand froze mid-air, my promotion certificate trapped between his fingers. In my dreams, this moment was supposed to be perfect. 7 years of military service, 2 deployments, a master's degree in digital marketing and data analytics, and countless sacrifices had led to this lieutenant colonel promotion. Instead, 200 pairs of eyes shifted between my mother and me, watching this family drama unfold during what should have been my moment of triumph. "She's a fraud," my mother continued, now standing and pointing directly at me. "I know because I raised her. She never earned anything in her life." My legs threatened to buckle beneath my dress blues. The other officers behind me shuffled nervously. Military families in the crowd exchanged uncomfortable glances. A baby started crying somewhere in the back, and the base security guards began moving toward my mother's row. I stood there frozen between humiliation and rage. Then I saw my friend Captain Ashley Chen's horrified face in the 3rd row. Her parents beside her looked mortified. "Major Thompson," my former commanding officer, shook his head sadly from the officers' section. Everyone I respected was witnessing this destruction. My mother wasn't finished. "Ask her about the night she came crying to me for money. Ask her how she really paid for her education." She was live streaming now, I realized with horror, holding up her phone to capture both herself and me. The red recording light felt like a laser burning into my soul. She had always been gifted at rewriting history. In her version, I was the ungrateful daughter who abandoned my family for military glory. She never mentioned cutting me off when I enlisted at 18. She conveniently forgot the cruel words she'd spat at me when I chose military service, instead of the influencer career she wanted for herself. Colonel Martinez cleared his throat into his microphone. The feedback screeched across the auditorium, making everyone wince. "Perhaps we should continue with the ceremony," he suggested diplomatically, but his eyes found mine with genuine concern. That's when something shifted inside me. The shame I'd carried for so long began transforming into something else entirely. My mother had chosen this public stage for a reason. She wanted maximum damage, maximum humiliation. She wanted to steal this moment from me just as she'd stolen so many others. But I wasn't 18 anymore. I wasn't the scared girl who had packed her belongings in garbage bags and slept on friends' couches. I had survived 7 years of military service without her money, without her approval, without her toxic presence poisoning every achievement. I straightened my shoulders and took those 3 remaining steps toward Colonel Martinez. The crowd held its breath. My mother's voice rose again behind me, but I blocked out her words. I had learned to do that years ago in basic training. "Congratulations, Lieutenant Colonel Taylor," Martinez whispered as he handed me my promotion certificate. His eyes held a question I couldn't answer yet. I leaned close to his ear, my voice steady despite the chaos behind me. "Sir, I need to speak with you privately after the ceremony. It's about my family situation, but it's also about something much bigger." He nodded slowly, understanding flickering in his expression. "My office, 30 minutes. As I turned to walk across the stage, my mother's accusations continued echoing through her phone's live stream. Security was definitely moving now, but she had found her audience on social media, and she was playing to it. "The military has lowered standards for women. This is what happens when you prioritize diversity over merit." The comments on her livestream were already exploding with reactions from both sides of the political spectrum. The other officers parted as I walked toward the exit stairs. Some looked sympathetic, others curious, a few judgmental. My face burned with embarrassment, but I kept walking. Each step felt deliberate now, purposeful. As I reached the bottom of the stairs, I heard the security guards finally reaching my mother. Her voice grew more shrill as they escorted her out, but I didn't turn around. I couldn't give her that satisfaction. In the corridor outside the auditorium, military families were gathering for photos. Children ran between the officers in their dress uniforms. Normal families celebrating normal achievements in normal ways. Everything I had wanted and would never have. My phone buzzed with notifications. The live stream was already going viral on TikTok and Instagram. #MilitaryMom and #DEI debate were trending. Ashley texted, "Are you okay? That was insane." My study group from the War College messaged, "Ignore her, Madison. We know who you really are." Even Major Rodriguez, who rarely spoke to junior officers outside of duty, had sent a message, "Don't let anyone dim your light today, LTC Taylor." But underneath their kindness, I could feel the questions forming. The doubt my mother had planted would grow roots. People would wonder if there was truth in her accusations about diversity hires and lowered standards. My reputation, built carefully over 7 years of genuine hard work and 2 combat deployments, was now tainted. I found an empty conference room and sat down, still clutching my promotion certificate. The leather case was warm from my sweating palms. Through the window, I could see families taking pictures on the parade ground, officers throwing their caps in the air in celebration. The ceremony continued without me. My mother's words replayed in my mind, but now I heard them differently. Each lie revealed her desperation. Each false accusation showed her weakness. She had lost control over me years ago when I enlisted, and this was her final attempt to destroy what I had built. But she had made one crucial mistake. She had chosen to destroy me publicly, in front of witnesses, in front of people who mattered. Colonel Martinez had seen her true nature. The officers had witnessed her cruelty. This wasn't just about me anymore. I stood up, smoothed my dress blues, and walked toward the colonel's office. My promotion day was ruined, but something else was beginning, something my mother wasn't prepared for. Colonel Martinez's office felt like a sanctuary after the chaos outside. He closed the door behind us and gestured for me to sit in the leather chair across from his mahogany desk. The walls were lined with military commendations and unit awards, a lifetime of service displayed with quiet pride. "Madison, what happened out there was completely inappropriate," he began, his voice gentle but firm. "Your mother's behavior was unacceptable, and I want you to know that this command stands behind you." I nodded, still gripping my promotion certificate. "Sir, there's something you need to know. This didn't happen randomly. My mother has been planning to destroy me for months, maybe years." His eyebrows raised slightly. "What do you mean, Lieutenant Colonel?" I took a deep breath, knowing this conversation would change everything. "It started 6 months ago when my GI Bill benefits were suddenly canceled. The VA said there was a problem with my account, but they couldn't explain what had happened." The memory of that day flooded back. I had been standing in line at the education office, confidently waiting to process my final semester benefits. The clerk had looked confused when she pulled up my account. "I'm sorry, Lieutenant Taylor, but it appears your GI Bill benefits have been completely exhausted. There's actually a negative balance showing fraudulent usage." I had stared at her computer screen in disbelief. My GI Bill benefits should have covered my entire master's degree with money left over. I had been careful, never taking more than necessary, even working part-time as an online tutor to cover living expenses. "That can't be right," I had told her. "Can you show me the transaction history?" What I saw made my stomach drop. Withdrawal after withdrawal dating back to my second deployment. Large amounts transferred to online education programs I'd never heard of. My carefully managed education benefits had been systematically drained while I was overseas serving my country. I knew something was seriously wrong, I continued to Colonel Martinez. So I used my deployment savings to hire a digital forensics expert. His expression grew more serious. "That's quite a step for a junior officer to take." Jake Rodriguez specialized in cryptocurrency fraud and military financial crimes. He was expensive, but he was thorough. I remembered our first meeting in his office in downtown Boston. Jake was a former Army CID investigator with kind eyes and calloused hands who treated my case with the same gravity he'd given major crimes. Within 2 weeks, Jake had uncovered a digital trail that made my blood boil. My mother hadn't just stolen money randomly. She had orchestrated a systematic theft, creating fake online education accounts and using my military credentials to access benefits. She had been intercepting my military communications for over a year, I explained to Colonel Martinez. The finance office had been sending statements to her address because she told them I was still living at home during my deployment. She had signed my name on benefit authorizations, claiming I needed the money for advanced military education. The most damaging discovery came when Jake traced the money to multiple cryptocurrency wallets. My mother had been funneling my military benefits into her personal trading accounts, using my education benefits as cover for her day trading addiction. But the worst part was the identity theft, I continued. Jake hired a digital forensics team that confirmed my mother had been using my military ID and social security number to open multiple accounts. We found evidence on her computer where she had saved screenshots of my military documents. Colonel Martinez leaned back in his chair, clearly processing the magnitude of what I was telling him. "Madison, this is criminal behavior. Have you contacted the authorities?" "Not yet, sir. I wanted to document everything first." I pulled out my phone and scrolled through the evidence I had been collecting. I have recordings of phone calls where she mocked me for struggling financially while she was literally stealing my military benefits. One particular conversation haunted me. My mother had called me while I was deployed in Afghanistan, right after I had picked up extra duty to earn money for textbooks. "Still working yourself to death for pennies, I see," she had said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "Maybe if you had chosen a practical career instead of playing soldier, you wouldn't be so broke." I had bitten my tongue, not knowing that she was spending my GI Bill money on luxury handbags and cryptocurrency speculation. Jake had shown me trading account statements proving she had lost over $40,000 on failed crypto investments in the same month she told me I was financially irresponsible. I started recording every conversation after that, I told Colonel Martinez. She couldn't help herself. She kept calling to remind me how much I needed her, how I would never succeed without her support. The irony was unbearable. The worst call had happened just 2 weeks before my promotion ceremony. My mother had sounded particularly pleased with herself. "You know, Madison, I've been thinking about your future. Without family support, you're going to struggle when you leave the military. Maybe it's time you admitted that you need your mother's guidance." I had stayed silent, letting her talk while my phone recorded every word. "I've always known you'd come crawling back eventually. You're not as independent as you pretend to be. Deep down, you're still that scared little girl who needs mommy to fix everything." Her laughter had echoed through the phone, cold and calculating. She had no idea that Jake was sitting across from me, documenting her psychological manipulation as evidence of financial abuse. "I spent weeks preparing for today," I admitted to Colonel Martinez. "I knew she would try something dramatic. She's always been theatrical when she wants to hurt me, but I never expected her to attack my military service." Colonel Martinez was quiet for a long moment, clearly overwhelmed by the scope of my mother's deception. "Madison, what you're describing is not just theft. This is a pattern of financial and emotional abuse that targets your military service specifically." I nodded, feeling the weight of finally sharing this burden with someone who understood the military implications. "The digital forensics expert has everything documented. Bank records, cryptocurrency transactions, recorded conversations, even evidence showing how she spent my combat pay on personal luxuries while I was deployed." "What do you plan to do with this information?" I looked directly at him, my voice steady and determined. "I'm going to make sure she faces consequences for what she's done, sir. Not just to me, but to prevent her from targeting other military families." The next morning, I sat in attorney Sarah Kim's office in downtown Boston, watching her review Jake Rodriguez's investigative report. Sarah came highly recommended by the base legal assistance office, a woman in her late 30s with sharp eyes who specialized in military financial crimes and cryptocurrency fraud. "This is one of the most thorough fraud cases I've seen involving military benefits," Sarah said, flipping through the digital evidence. Your mother didn't just steal money, Madison. She committed identity theft wire fraud and specifically targeted military financial systems. These are federal crimes. My hands trembled slightly as I signed the paperwork to initiate the civil lawsuit. Sarah had explained that criminal charges would come later through the military justice system and federal prosecutors, but the civil case would force my mother to return the stolen funds immediately. The process server will deliver the papers this afternoon, Sarah explained. Are you prepared for her reaction? I nodded, though my stomach churned with anxiety. I've been preparing for this moment for months. At exactly 3:47 p.m., my phone rang. My mother's number appeared on the screen, and I answered on the second ring, putting it on speaker so Sarah could hear. What have you done? My mother's voice was shrill panic, barely contained beneath her fury. Some stranger just handed me legal papers at my front door. I filed a lawsuit for theft and fraud, I said calmly. Everything is documented, Mom. The cryptocurrency transactions, the stolen military benefits, every penny you took. I never stole anything. That money was for your education, and you wasted it on your stupid military career. Sarah raised her eyebrows, gesturing for me to keep her talking. My mother's admissions were building our case with every word. You moved $180,000 from my cryptocurrency inheritance to trading accounts in your name, I continued. While I was deployed in Afghanistan, you were day trading with my combat pay. You can't prove any of that, and after everything I sacrificed for you, this is how you repay me. Actually, I can prove it. I have blockchain transaction records, forged documents, and recorded phone calls. Everything you've done is documented by a former Army CID investigator. The line went quiet for several seconds. When my mother spoke again, her voice had changed, becoming artificially sweet and manipulative. Honey, you're being ridiculous. We're family. We can work this out without lawyers and courts. Why don't you come over for dinner tonight, and we'll talk about this like adults? Sarah shook her head, firmly mouthing, absolutely not. The time for talking ended when you destroyed my promotion ceremony, I replied. You'll hear from my attorney. I hung up and immediately turned off my phone. Sarah looked impressed. That went better than expected. She essentially admitted to moving the money and tried to manipulate you into dropping the case. Textbook financial abuse behavior targeting a military family member. Within hours, news of the lawsuit began spreading through our military community. Fort Devens had only 15,000 personnel, and legal drama involving officer families traveled fast. My mother had been active in the Family Readiness Group and various base volunteer organizations. Her public image was carefully cultivated over years of military spouse activities. By evening, my phone was buzzing with messages from people I hadn't spoken to in years. Some offered support, others demanded explanations. Mrs. Patterson, our former neighbor on base housing, texted, Honey, I always knew something wasn't right about your mother's finances. She bragged about expensive vacations while claiming she couldn't afford to help with your education. The most surprising message came from Jennifer Walsh, my mother's former friend from the Officers' Wives Club. Madison, I need to tell you something about your mother's trading addiction. Can we meet for coffee? The next morning, Jennifer and I sat in a corner booth at the IHOP near base, away from curious ears. Jennifer looked nervous, constantly glancing around as if my mother might appear. She's been lying to everyone for years, Jennifer began. About 3 years ago, she started organizing cryptocurrency trading groups among military spouses. At first, it seemed harmless, just wives learning about digital investments. But then she started borrowing money. From everyone. She asked me for $5,000, claiming it was for a family emergency while you were deployed. She borrowed from other women in our spouse group, too. None of us ever got paid back. My stomach sank as Jennifer continued revealing the scope of my mother's financial deception. She had been running what amounted to a pyramid scheme among military spouses, borrowing money from one friend to pay back another while feeding her trading addiction. Last month, she showed up at my house, desperate for cash, Jennifer whispered. She claimed you were in some kind of legal trouble and needed emergency money for a military lawyer. She wanted me to write a check for $8,000. What did you tell her? I said no, but Madison, She seemed different, desperate, almost manic. That's when I started wondering where all her money was really coming from. That afternoon, Sarah called with an update. The court has scheduled a preliminary hearing for next week. Your mother hired Richard Blackwood from a high-end Boston firm. He's expensive, which is interesting considering she claims financial hardship. She's probably using my stolen military benefits to pay for her defense lawyer, I said bitterly. That's actually good for our case. We can trace those payments, too. On the morning of the hearing, I arrived at the federal courthouse in Boston, wearing my dress blue uniform. Sarah had suggested it would reinforce my credibility as a military officer. The building was imposing with marble floors that echoed our footsteps. My mother sat across the aisle with her attorney wearing a conservative navy dress and looking like the perfect picture of a respectable military spouse. She wouldn't make eye contact with me instead, whispering urgently to Mr. Blackwood. Judge Patricia Reeves entered the courtroom and everyone stood. She was a woman in her 60s with gray hair pulled back severely and intelligent eyes that seemed to see everything. This is a preliminary hearing for the case of Taylor versus Taylor, she announced. Ms. Kim, please present your client's claims. Sarah stood confidently, her voice clear and professional. Your Honor, we're seeking damages for systematic financial fraud committed by the defendant against her own daughter, a United States Army officer. Over a period of 3 years, the defendant forged signatures, intercepted military communications, and transferred approximately $180,000 from cryptocurrency accounts and military benefits to personal trading accounts. My mother's lawyer stood to respond. Your Honor, this is simply a family financial dispute being blown out of proportion by a vindictive daughter. Mrs. Taylor acted as a concerned parent managing her child's finances during military deployment. Judge Reeves looked directly at my mother. Mrs. Taylor, did you have legal authority to access your daughter's military benefits and cryptocurrency accounts after she turned 18? My mother's voice cracked as she replied, I was protecting her interests, Your Honor. She was irresponsible with money while deployed. That's not what I asked. Did you have legal authority to move funds from accounts in her name to trading accounts in your name? The silence stretched uncomfortably long. My mother's face flushed red as she realized her mistake. Mrs. Taylor, I'm ordering a complete forensic audit of all financial transactions involved in this case, including military benefit fraud. We will reconvene in 30 days with a full accounting. As we left the courthouse, I noticed my phone had 17 missed calls from military family members. The news of the forensic audit had apparently traveled fast through our base community network. The first voicemail was from Aunt Patricia, my mother's younger sister who lived near Fort Knox. Madison, honey, we need to talk. There are things about your mother you don't know, things that happened years ago with military families. Please call me back. I dialed her number from Sarah's office while we waited for copies of the court documents. Aunt Patricia answered on the first ring, her voice strained and urgent. Madison, I've been carrying this secret for 10 years, but after what happened in court today, I can't stay silent anymore. What secret, Aunt Patricia? Your mother stole from me too. When your grandmother died, she left cryptocurrency investments for you and Dylan's education. Bitcoin she had bought in 2012, about $50,000 worth at the time, now worth over $300,000. My hands went numb. She stole my inheritance. Your mother was supposed to manage the digital wallets until you both turned 18. She convinced me it was better to consolidate everything for tax purposes. I trusted her because she seemed so knowledgeable about cryptocurrency. The betrayal cut deeper than I expected. Not only had my mother stolen my military benefits, but she had been stealing from family for years, specifically targeting cryptocurrency assets that were harder to trace. Aunt Patricia, why didn't you ever tell me? She threatened to cut me off from the family if I said anything. And honestly, Madison, I was ashamed. I should have protected that money for you and Dylan, but I let her manipulate me. That evening, I drove to Dylan's apartment in Cambridge. My 20-year-old brother had been discharged from the Army after failing his physical fitness tests repeatedly. He now worked at a tech startup and lived in a small studio near MIT. Dylan opened the door wearing a Red Sox t-shirt, his hair still messy from sleep. He had always been my mother's favorite, the one who could do no wrong in her eyes, until his military failure. "Madison, what are you doing here? Mom said you were trying to destroy the family with some crazy lawsuit." "Can I come in? We need to talk." His apartment was sparse but clean, with a gaming setup that served as both entertainment and workstation. I spread out copies of the financial documents Sarah had given me, watching Dylan's expression change as he processed what he was seeing. "This can't be right," he said, studying a blockchain transaction showing transfers from our inheritance funds. "Mom told me your crypto money ran out because you were spending it on expensive military gear and courses." "Dylan, look at the dates. She was moving this money while I was deployed in Afghanistan, living in a tent and eating MREs. His face crumpled as the reality sank in. "She used to call me complaining about how irresponsible you were with money. She said you kept asking her for help, and she had to keep bailing you out. I never asked her for a penny after I enlisted. Every conversation we had, she was stealing from me while lecturing me about responsibility." Dylan sat down heavily, running his hands through his hair. "What about my inheritance? Did she steal from me too?" I pulled out another set of documents. "She moved your cryptocurrency into the same trading accounts. But Dylan, your fund was smaller to begin with because she'd been using it to cover her expenses since you were 16. "No." His voice was barely a whisper. "She always said she was saving every Satoshi for my education. That's why I couldn't afford the computer science program I wanted." The next few days brought an avalanche of revelations as military family members began sharing their own experiences with my mother's financial manipulation. My cousin Rachel called to tell me about a loan that was never repaid. My Uncle David mentioned strange requests for emergency money over the years. But the most shocking call came from Mrs. Elizabeth Morris, my grandmother's former neighbor from her retirement community in Florida. "Dear, I hope you don't mind me calling, but I saw the news about your lawsuit online. I knew your grandmother well, and there's something I need to tell you about the week she passed away, Mrs. Morris was 86 and spoke slowly, but her memory was sharp. "Your mother came to your grandmother's house the day after the funeral. She had boxes and was removing documents from your grandmother's computer and desk." "What kind of documents?" "Cryptocurrency wallet information, investment records, digital estate documents." "But Madison, your grandmother had shown me her digital will just months before she died. She was very specific about leaving Bitcoin investments for your education." My throat tightened with emotion I hadn't expected. My grandmother had died when I was 16, and my mother had told me she'd left everything to charity except for a few personal items. "Mrs. Morris, do you remember anything specific about the cryptocurrency?" "She left Bitcoin worth about $50,000 each for you and your brother's education, and another wallet with $30,000 for your future wedding. She wanted to make sure you had choices in life, dear. She was very concerned about your mother's controlling behavior even then." That revelation sent me straight back to Sarah's office. If my mother had hidden additional inheritance money, it meant the theft was even more extensive than we had documented. Sarah immediately filed for expanded discovery, demanding access to all of my mother's financial records and cryptocurrency transactions from the past 10 years. "Madison, if she's been systematically stealing inheritance money and military benefits, we're looking at a much larger federal case. The military justice system will want to prosecute this separately from the civil case." The legal pressure began affecting my mother's social standing in ways I hadn't anticipated. Her military spouse groups stopped including her in events. The base commander's wife quietly asked her to step down from her volunteer positions. Even the commissary clerks treated her differently, their polite smiles replaced with cool professionalism. Dylan started avoiding her calls and eventually moved in with his girlfriend to escape the constant pressure to choose sides. "She keeps asking me to convince you to drop the lawsuit," he told me one evening. "She says you're destroying the family for money you don't even need." "What do you tell her?" "The truth that she destroyed the family when she decided to steal from her own children while one was deployed in combat." The breaking point came 3 weeks after the preliminary hearing. I was in my apartment preparing for a unit briefing when I heard shouting outside. Through my window, I saw my mother standing on the sidewalk, her hair disheveled, and her voice carrying across the quiet military housing area. "Madison, I know you're in there. You need to stop this nonsense right now." I didn't move from my position by the window, watching as she paced back and forth like a caged animal. Neighbors were starting to come outside, drawn by the commotion. "You're destroying everything I've worked for, everything I've built, and for what? Money you don't even need because the army pays for everything." She started up the steps to my front door, pounding with both fists. "Open this door. We're family. You can't do this to your own mother." The desperation in her voice was something I'd never heard before. This wasn't the controlled, manipulative woman who had terrorized my childhood. This was someone who had finally lost control of her carefully constructed image. "I sacrificed everything for you and your brother, everything, and this is how you repay me." Mrs. Peterson from next door appeared on her porch, her phone in her hand. "Madison, honey, should I call the MPs?" My mother heard her and spun around. "Mind your own business, this is between me and my daughter." But then something changed. Her voice broke and she collapsed onto my porch steps, sobbing with an intensity that shook her entire body. For the first time in my life, I saw my mother as she truly was, not the powerful matriarch, but a desperate woman whose lies had finally caught up with her. I stayed by the window until she eventually got up and walked back to her car, leaving behind only the echo of her breakdown and the certain knowledge that our relationship, whatever it had been, was truly over. The final hearing was scheduled for a crisp October morning, 6 months after my mother's breakdown on my porch. The federal courthouse steps were slick with fallen leaves, and I could see my breath in the cool air as Sarah and I climbed toward the entrance. "Remember Madison," Sarah said as we walked through the metal detectors. "Today is about justice, not revenge. Let the evidence speak." The courtroom was packed. Dylan sat in the front row behind me, his girlfriend Lisa holding his hand tightly. Aunt Patricia had driven down from Kentucky, her face drawn with exhaustion from years of carrying secrets. Even Mrs. Morris had insisted on attending despite her age, flying up from Florida. My mother sat across the aisle with Mr. Blackwood, looking smaller than I remembered. Her designer clothes had been replaced with a simple black dress, and her usually perfect hair hung limp around her shoulders. The months of legal pressure had aged her visibly. Judge Reeves entered exactly at 9 o'clock, her black robes flowing behind her as she took her seat. "We are here today for the final ruling in Taylor versus Taylor. Both parties have submitted their evidence, and the court has reviewed all forensic reports." She gestured to the witness stand, where Dr. Patricia Hammond, the digital forensics expert, sat with a folder full of evidence. Dr. Hammond was a woman in her 50s with wire-rimmed glasses and the quiet confidence of someone who had testified in hundreds of cases. "Dr. Hammond, please present your findings to the court." Dr. Hammond opened her folder and pulled out a series of enlarged blockchain transaction records and digital signatures. "Your Honor, I analyzed over 60 cryptocurrency transactions and digital documents spanning 3 years. The evidence clearly shows systematic identity theft and financial fraud." She held up one of the documents, pointing to my supposed digital signature on a benefit transfer form. This signature was created by someone attempting to forge the plaintiff's digital identity. "You can see the metadata inconsistencies here, where the defendant used personal devices to access military systems." My mother shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Mr. Blackwood whispered something to her, but she didn't respond. "Furthermore," Dr. Hammond continued, "I found evidence on the defendant's computer showing she had saved screenshots of the plaintiff's military ID social security number and cryptocurrency wallet information. This demonstrates premeditation and intent to defraud." Judge Reeves studied the evidence carefully. "Dr. Hammond, in your professional opinion, is there any possibility these transactions were legitimate?" "None whatsoever, Your Honor. The defendant systematically stole her daughter's military benefits and cryptocurrency inheritance through identity theft and fraudulent access to federal systems. This was not a case of family financial management. This was deliberate fraud targeting a deployed service member." The silence in the courtroom was complete. I could hear the clock ticking on the wall behind the judge's bench. My mother's breathing had become shallow and rapid. Judge Reeves turned to address the courtroom directly. The evidence in this case is overwhelming. Mrs. Taylor systematically stole from her daughter's military benefits and cryptocurrency inheritance through identity theft, wire fraud, and abuse of federal systems. She violated not only federal law, but the fundamental trust between parent and child, specifically targeting her daughter during military deployment. She paused, her eyes moving between my mother and me. This court finds that the defendant unlawfully transferred $180,000 from cryptocurrency inheritance accounts and $165,000 in military benefits and combat pay. Additionally, the evidence shows she concealed inheritance funds totaling $120,000 that were specifically designated for both children's education. My mother made a sound somewhere between a gasp and a sob. Dylan reached over and squeezed my shoulder. "Mrs. Taylor." Judge Reeves continued, her voice stern. "Your actions represent a betrayal of the most basic parental responsibilities made worse by your targeting of a deployed service member. You stole from your own daughter while she was serving her country in combat zones." She lifted her gavel. "Therefore, this court orders you to repay the full amount of $465,000 plus punitive damages of $285,000 plus interest and legal fees. The total judgment is $750,000. The gavel fell with a sharp crack that echoed through the silent courtroom. My mother's composure finally shattered completely. She doubled over in her chair, sobbing uncontrollably while Mr. Blackwood tried unsuccessfully to calm her. The sound of her crying filled the courtroom, raw and desperate. I felt Dylan's hand tighten on my shoulder, but I couldn't take my eyes off my mother. I had imagined this moment for months, but I felt no satisfaction, no sense of victory. Instead, I felt hollow, like something inside me had finally been put to rest. Judge Reeves wasn't finished. "Mrs. Taylor, I am also referring this case to the U.S. Attorney's Office for criminal prosecution. The systematic nature of your fraud, particularly targeting military benefits and federal systems, warrants federal criminal charges." As court officers began the process of serving the judgment papers, reporters who had learned about the case crowded near the doors. The story had gained national attention due to the military angle and cryptocurrency fraud. Sarah quickly guided me toward a side exit, but I could hear their voices calling out questions. "Lieutenant Colonel Taylor, how do you feel about the verdict? Will you be pursuing criminal charges? What's your relationship with your mother now?" I kept walking, saying nothing. This wasn't about publicity or revenge. It was about justice for the scared 18-year-old girl who had been thrown out of her home and told she was worthless, and for every other military family member who might be targeted by financial predators. That evening, I sat in my small apartment with a certified check for the first payment from my mother's liquidated assets. Mr. Blackwood had explained that she would need to sell her house, her car, and cash out her remaining investments to meet the judgment. She would be left with almost nothing. The check felt surreal in my hands, more money than I had ever imagined obtained through the destruction of the woman who had given birth to me. Dylan sat across from me, equally stunned by the day's events. "She's going to have to sell everything," he said quietly. "The house we grew up in, her car, everything." "I know. Do you think we did the right thing?" I looked at my younger brother, this man who had stood by me even when it meant losing the only parent he had left. "Dylan, she stole our futures. She stole our grandmother's love for us. She would have kept stealing until there was nothing left." He nodded, but I could see the pain in his eyes. Winning in court didn't erase the fact that we were now orphans by choice, cut off from the only family we had known. Sarah called later that evening to discuss the criminal referral. "Madison, the U.S. attorney, is very interested in this case. Your mother's pattern of financial abuse targeting military families could result in significant federal prison time." "How long?" "With the identity theft charges, wire fraud, and the systematic targeting of military benefits, she could face 8 to 15 years in federal prison." I closed my eyes, trying to process the magnitude of what was happening. My mother, who had once seemed so powerful and controlling, was about to lose everything. Her money, her house, her freedom, her reputation, all destroyed by her own greed and cruelty. Sarah, what happens now? Now we wait for the criminal proceedings to begin. And Madison, you should be proud of yourself. You stood up to someone who had power over you your entire life, and you protected other military families from becoming victims. But as I hung up the phone and looked around my small apartment, I realized that winning wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning. The idea came to me 3 weeks after the verdict while I was sorting through my grandmother's jewelry box that Aunt Patricia had finally given me. Hidden beneath the velvet lining, I found a yellowed envelope with my name written in my grandmother's careful script. Inside was a letter dated just months before her death, along with a small USB drive. My dearest Madison, if you're reading this, it means your mother never gave you the inheritance I left for your education. On this drive, you'll find the wallet keys to Bitcoin I purchased in 2012, not just for you and Dylan, but for a larger purpose. I've watched too many military families struggle with financial predators. Use these resources to help other young service members who need a chance. You have more strength than you know, and I believe you'll build something beautiful from whatever pain you've endured. All my love, Grandma Helen. My hands trembled as I folded the letter. Even from beyond the grave, my grandmother was guiding me towards something bigger than my own pain. The USB drive contained wallet information for Bitcoin worth over $400,000 at current prices, money my mother never knew existed. My grandmother had been more tech-savvy than anyone realized. That same afternoon, I called Sarah to discuss establishing a foundation. I want to create a scholarship and support fund for military family members who've been victims of financial abuse, I told her. Young service members who are trying to build futures without family support or who've been targeted by financial predators. Sarah smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her in months of legal battles. Madison, that's beautiful. What do you want to call it? The Helen Taylor Foundation for Military Financial Security. Within 6 months, the foundation was official. I had invested most of the settlement money and my grandmother's hidden Bitcoin into an endowment that would provide support indefinitely. The first recipients would receive $25,000 toward education or debt relief, with smaller amounts going to 6 additional military families each year. But the foundation offered more than money. We provided financial literacy courses specifically designed for military families, legal assistance for victims of financial fraud, and a mentorship program connecting young service members with successful veterans. My mother's attempts to contact me intensified as news of the foundation spread through military publications and social media. She left voicemails that progressed from angry demands to tearful pleas, but I never listened to them completely. Dylan would update me occasionally. She had moved into a small apartment in a different state, worked at a retail store, and seemed genuinely shocked that her actions had consequences. She keeps asking me to give you her letters, Dylan told me during one of our weekly dinners. She says she's changed, that she understands what she did wrong. What do you tell her? The truth, that some things can't be fixed with apologies. I had burned the first few letters without opening them, but eventually curiosity won, and I read one. It was filled with the same manipulation. I remembered taking partial responsibility while blaming circumstances, promising change while making excuses. I threw it away and never opened another. My new life took shape slowly. I bought a small house in Westfield with a front porch and a backyard perfect for a garden. The previous owner had left behind rose bushes that reminded me of my grandmother's garden, and I spent weekends learning to care for them. The biggest change came when I visited the animal shelter on a rainy Saturday morning. I wasn't planning to adopt anything, just volunteering to help with their social media outreach. But a 3-year-old golden retriever mix named Honey chose me, following me around the yard and sitting patiently by my feet during the entire volunteer orientation. She's been here for 4 months, the shelter coordinator explained. She was surrendered when her elderly owner moved to assisted living. She's gentle and well-trained, but people want puppies. Honey rode home in my passenger seat that day, her head out the window and her tail wagging. For the first time in years, my house felt truly alive. I also returned to painting something I had abandoned in college when my mother mocked it as impractical. My small, spare bedroom became a studio filled with canvases and the smell of oil paints. I painted landscapes, mostly peaceful scenes that had nothing to do with courtrooms or family drama. The first scholarship ceremony was held at the community college near Fort Devens. 7 military family members sat in the front row, each with their own story of financial abuse or family rejection. Maria, the primary recipient, was 25 and studying nursing after her husband drained their joint accounts during his deployment. As I stood behind the podium looking at these brave people who had chosen education over surrender, I felt my grandmother's presence strongly. Financial abuse isn't just about money. I began, my voice steady, despite the emotion I felt. It's about someone trying to control your future, trying to convince you that you're not worthy of investment. Each of you has already proven them wrong by being here today. Maria wiped tears from her eyes. 2 of the other recipients held hands supporting each other as they had probably learned to do when family support wasn't available. Each of you has already demonstrated the most important quality for success: resilience. You've chosen to move forward when others tried to hold you back. You've chosen hope when despair would have been easier. I paused, looking at their determined faces full of possibility. This scholarship comes with one requirement. When you're established in your careers, when you're stable and successful, find another military family member who needs a chance and help them. That's how we build something lasting from temporary pain. The ceremony ended with individual meetings where I got to hear their stories. Sarah Beth was studying cybersecurity after her parents disowned her for refusing to give them access to her military accounts. Jennifer was pursuing her social work degree despite her family's insistence that military wives should focus on supporting their husbands' careers. Lisa wanted to become a financial counselor to help other abuse survivors navigate their recovery. As the evening wound down and the recipients left with their checks and congratulations, I stood alone in the empty conference room. The weight I had carried for so many years, the anger, the resentment, the constant need to prove my worth to someone who would never see it, had finally lifted. Dylan found me there, straightening chairs and collecting empty coffee cups. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Free," I said, and meant it completely. For the first time in my life, I feel free. Walking to my car that night, I realized something profound had shifted. I wasn't Madison Taylor, the daughter who had been publicly humiliated and financially abused. I wasn't the victim who had fought back in court and won. I was simply Madison, a woman who had survived her past and chosen to build something meaningful from the wreckage. Honey was waiting for me on the front porch when I got home, her tail wagging in the porch light. My roses were blooming despite the late season, filling the air with their sweet fragrance. Inside, canvases waited for new paintings, new visions of beauty that had nothing to do with old pain. I had everything I needed. I had built a life that belonged entirely to me, funded a future for military families who needed chances, and finally understood what my grandmother had seen in me all those years ago: the strength to transform suffering into something beautiful, something useful, something that would outlast the people who had tried to diminish me. 6 months later, my mother was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. The judge cited the particularly egregious nature of financial crimes targeting deployed military personnel in his sentencing decision. I didn't attend the hearing, but Dylan did. He told me she had finally seemed to understand the gravity of what she'd done. "She asked me to tell you she was sorry," he said quietly. "What did you tell her?" "That sorry doesn't give you back the years of pain or the trust or the family we could have been." The foundation continued to grow. By the end of our second year, we had helped 35 military families escape financial abuse situations. We had lobbied for stronger protections for deployed service members' financial accounts. We had created educational programs that were now standard at military financial readiness training. Most importantly, we had built a community. Recipients stayed connected, supporting each other through challenges and celebrating successes. The foundation had become more than a scholarship program. It was a family for people who had lost theirs. Standing in my backyard on a quiet Sunday morning watching honey chase butterflies among my grandmother's roses, I realized I had accomplished something my mother never could. I had built something that would outlast me, something that made the world a little bit better, something that honored the people who had believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself. That was enough. More than enough. It was everything. The Foundation's mobile app had just launched, connecting military financial abuse survivors across the country with resources and support. In our first week, we had over 2,000 downloads. The comments section was filled with stories of hope, resilience, and gratitude. I thought about my mother sometimes sitting in her federal prison cell, finally facing the consequences of her choices. I felt no satisfaction in her punishment, but I felt peace knowing that other families were safer because of our work. My phone buzzed with a notification from the Foundation app. Another military family had submitted an application for emergency assistance, a young Marine whose father had drained his combat pay while he was deployed in Syria. I smiled and opened my laptop to begin reviewing his case. The cycle continued, but now it was a cycle of healing instead of harm, and that made all the difference. Story 2. I was rinsing coffee cups and humming along to a playlist when my phone buzzed on the counter. Ordinary morning, warm light, plants begging for water. Then a bright banner slid across the screen. Torres family. Mom Carmen had posted. Christmas Eve is at our house, 6 p.m. We want a peaceful night, so it's best if Mila sits this one out. Thanks for understanding. I'm Mila Torres, 33, project manager. No husband, no kids. Mostly fine with that until a message like this hits like a brick. The chat reacted in seconds. My dad Luis tapped a thumbs up. My brother Dylan added a green check mark. My sister Tessa sent a heart. Aunt Nora dropped confetti. Uncle Paul posted a smiley face wearing sunglasses like exile was cool. No one asked why. No one typed hold on. No one called me. I reread the text. Once, twice, 3 times. The sink kept running. The cups overflowed. I turned the water off and dried my hands on a towel that suddenly felt too rough. I typed erased, typed again. Insults, comebacks, speeches, they all sprinted through my head. In the end, I sent the only thing I could live with. Got it. I won't come. Please don't contact me for a while. I'll respect your boundary. Respect mine. A string of jester hat emojis landed under my message. Jesters, not clowns. Cute. Harsher somehow. I left the chat. Blocked notifications. Stared at the pale outline of a water ring on my counter, and wondered when exactly love got traded for convenience. It didn't start with that text. It started a month earlier on a Sunday when I brought a lemon tart to my parents' place because Mom swore her pie crusts hated her. The house smelled like rosemary chicken and floor cleaner. The dining room gleamed. 5 kinds of mustard lined up like soldiers on the buffet because my dad likes options. I was in a good mood. I'd nailed a deadline at work. I'd bought boots on sale. I even liked my hair that day. We were barely seated when Mom cleared her throat, china clinking under her fork. We made a decision, she said, smiling in that way that warns you to brace. We're doing a 12-day Mediterranean cruise for Christmas. Family dream. We've been talking for weeks. Tessa bounced in her chair. I found cabins with balconies. There's a spa, thermal suite, cold plunge, the works. Dylan leaned back, laced his fingers behind his head. Game on. I'm picturing gelato and scooters. I smiled, confused but trying. That sounds fun. What do you need me to bring? Silence. Then Aunt Nora voice sweet as icing. Oh, honey, you're not bringing anything. You're treating. They watched my face like people watch fireworks waiting for the pop. Mom slid a printed spreadsheet across the table. Columns, colors, totals. My stomach tightened. For all of us, she said, tapping numbers with a manicured nail. Cabins for 8, excursions in Rome, Athens, Santorini, pre-cruise hotel. We kept it reasonable. 22,400 covers it. My brain stalled. I glanced around, waiting for someone to laugh. No one laughed. Tessa sipped her water. You earn more than anyone, Mila. You don't have kids. You're always careful with money. This is nothing for you. Dylan grinned. Consider it your investment in family memories. Uncle Paul floated his sunglasses voice again. Maybe we bump the drink package. It's all on one card anyway. Wink. Of course there was a spreadsheet. Of course there was a plan. I wasn't in on it, only paying for it. Why would I do that? I asked steady. Because I'd practiced steady my whole life. Mom's smile thinned. Because you're the responsible one. Because we've helped you in other ways. Because family sticks together. What other ways? When I worked 2 jobs in college so I wouldn't need loans. When my car died and Dad told me to manifest a better attitude. When I found temp work for Dylan and he quit after 3 days. I looked down at the sheet. Port fees, transfer vans, suggested tips. No, I said, just that, a clean cut? The room cooled. Dad set his fork down like he was laying a brick on a grave. Tessa's face pinched. Dylan rolled his eyes. Aunt Nora told her napkin a secret. Mom leaned in, voice soft and dangerous. You're separating yourself from us, Mila. Over money. I'm setting a boundary, I said, over respect. Dinner happened in a frost after that. They ate. I tasted nothing. The lemon tart sat uncut in the kitchen, accusing me with its perfect lattice. I left my parents' house with my coat half-buttoned, and that spreadsheet folded so hard it nearly split. I sat in my car and counted my breaths, 4 and 6 out. My hands shook on the steering wheel. Rage felt simple. What scared me was the shame, the part of me that asked, what if they're right? What if I'm selfish? For a week, nobody called. No texts, no you home safe. It was unusual. My family usually contacted me for every blown tire, every bounced check, every quick favor. The silence should have felt like peace. It felt like a plan. Here's the truth I never wanted to say out loud. I had trained them to treat me like this. I kept receipts in a shoebox labeled taxes, but it was really proof I matter. $400 for Dylan's late tuition fee, $900 for Tessa's dental work, $12,000 toward my parents' roof when the storm took shingles and Dad's pride, 4 birthdays in a row where I sponsored the whole meal so no one had to stress. Loan here, loan there, none repaid. We'll catch you next time, they said. There was never a next time unless someone needed something. I told myself it was love, it was insurance, it bought me a place at the table. What did it actually buy me? A spreadsheet with my name at the bottom. A grand total. A roll with no lines, just payment due. The worst part wasn't the ask. It was the way they already spent my yes before they heard it. They'd chosen cabins. They'd picked excursions. They'd assigned me to foot the bill while pretending generosity was my idea. After the silent week came the family text, the exile dressed up as peace, the jester hats. I dragged the phone's block slider and felt like I was slicing rope. The apartment hummed with weekend quiet, the kind where refrigerators get loud and you hear your upstairs neighbor teaching his kid the same piano scale over and over. I sat on the floor with my knees up and let my mind walk back one more month to a conversation I had shoved into a drawer labeled later. Seattle, my boss Harper had said, making it sound like a lake rather than a city. We're opening a West Coast office. I want you to lead it. Budget autonomy, your own hires, pay bump. We'll move you. Think it over. I'd told her no in under 10 seconds. My family needs me nearby, I said. They rely on me. Harper accepted it because she's decent. Door stays open, she said. For a little while. Nearby, I had said. Translation available. When a tire blows. When a roof leaks. When a dream cruise needs a sponsor. I pulled out my shoebox, spread the receipts on the carpet like a paper map of a country I didn't want to live in anymore. The totals didn't even matter. What mattered was the pattern. My signature as a bandage over every crisis. My worth measured in Venmo notes and wire transfers. My seat at the table paid for, never offered. A text from my friend Nina pinged through Nina, who once sat with me in a grocery store parking lot while we cried into drive-through fries about families that could never have enough. You okay? She wrote. Feel like your spider sense just went off. I typed, they uninvited me from Christmas, and then I think they expect me to apologize. Nina called. You won't, she said. Not a question. A shield. You don't owe anyone a vacation. You don't owe anyone your peace. I looked at the shoebox country. The borders were my doing. The roads always pointed to their house. What if I move? I asked. The room felt bigger the second I said it. What if I go where the work wants me? Then I'll help you pack, Nina said, and I'll label the good kitchen knives so you don't lose them. We laughed. It wasn't a joyful laugh. It was a release valve. I opened my laptop, pulled up our company directory. Harper's name glowed like a small lighthouse on a foggy coast. Before I clicked, one more memory arrived uninvited. Owen from accounting, a quiet guy who spots patterns for sport, once said after a late meeting, "You always apologize before you ask for something. Even when you're asking for what you already earned." I joked it off then. Now it sounded like a diagnosis. I took a breath that reached my spine. My hands stopped shaking. I clicked Harper's number. Harper picked up on the second ring. No small talk. "Still open to Seattle?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "I'm ready." The quiet on her end felt like a smile. "I'll have HR send the offer today. Housing for 60 days. Moving stipend. You pick your team." My chest warmed. Not joy. Not yet. Permission. "When do you want me there?" I asked. 6 weeks, she said. "Sooner if you can stand it." "I can stand it." We hung up. I stared at my kitchen wall clock and felt the second hand drag the room forward. 6 weeks. That was a plan. Plans I could do. Nina came over with a roll of bubble wrap and an iced coffee the size of a vase. "Tell me what to label," she said already, pulling dishes from the cabinet. "The knives that actually cut," I said. "The mixing bowl with the dent. My grandmother's spoon." She nodded a general with tape. "What about telling them?" "Not yet." I kept my voice even. "If I tell them, they'll make it about them. I need a clean exit." Nina didn't argue. That's why she's my anchor. She only asked, "Where do you want the shoebox?" "In the trash," I said, and meant it. She slid it next to the bin, and I thanked it for its service before I dumped the contents. Receipts, no more map. I still had automatic transfers set up, mortgage help for my parents, gas money for Dylan, a small monthly deposit into Tessa's emergency fund, which somehow always lined up with new shoes and eyelash fills. I didn't touch any of it. Not yet. If I shut it off now, the alarms would go off. They'd come banging on my door with casseroles and guilt. I needed time to pack my life into numbered boxes and move it 3 states north. So I did one last favor. I let the payments run for one final month. Call it cowardice. Call it strategy. I called it a bridge I only had to cross once. The next Sunday, I drove to my parents' house to drop off a cake stand I'd borrowed. It wasn't a goodbye visit. It was an errand with calm breathing. The rosemary chicken smell tried to sweet-talk me at the door. Tessa was on the couch with her laptop open to travel vlogs. Dylan played a soccer video on mute and watched it like it was sacred. Mom looked surprised, then glad, then careful. "Mila," she said, kissing the air near my cheek. "You're here." "Returning this," I said, holding up the stand like a hostage swap. "Thanks for lending it." She took it with both hands. "You could have kept it." I didn't want to. Dad appeared from the hallway with a stack of mail. He tried a grin. "Stay for dinner. We've got plenty." "I can't," I said. "Deadline week." Tessa closed her laptop. "Oh, Mila, do you know how long passport renewals are taking? Mine's due in March. We need them for the cruise." She looked at me like I managed the State Department. "I'm not paying for the cruise," I said, steady. Her mouth twitched. "No one's asking you to. Lie neat as a ribbon. I was just wondering." Dylan jumped in. "I blew a tire. Twice. What are the chances?" He laughed at his luck like it was a sitcom. "You always pick good shops. Text me the name." "Sure," I said. "A true favor. Free. They're honest. Ask for Ramon." Mom slid the cake stand into a cabinet and turned with that soft, dangerous voice. "We miss you." The message, it wasn't meant to hurt you. We just needed peace. Peace from what I asked. From me saying no. Her face didn't move. From drama. "Okay," I said, because I wasn't going to win a definition fight in a kitchen. I should go. On the way out, Miss Alvarez from next door waved at me from her porch. She's the revealer in this story, though she didn't mean to be. "Sunshine," she called. She's called me Sunshine since I was 10 and shoveled her steps in a rainstorm. I hear the family's cruising the blue for Christmas. Lucky ducks. My foot stopped on the walkway. "You heard? Your mom told the book club, said a generous angel was making it happen." She winked. "You always were the kind one." The kind one, the responsible one, the open wallet. I smiled and kept walking. My hands shook all the way to the car. I sat behind the wheel and whispered, "You're leaving." Saying it out loud locked it in my bones. The offer letter hit my inbox that night. I read it twice. Salary, stipend, start date. There was a line at the bottom. "We're thrilled to see what you build." I signed, sent it back, and booked a one-way for the day after my lease ended. The next 2 weeks came in flashes. Nina labeling boxes. Me clearing my closet with a ruthless mercy I wished I'd used on people. A Craigslist guy named Trevor buying my couch for cash and telling me it would be perfect for movie marathons and giant naps. Harper looping me into Seattle Slack channels with welcome emojis. Owen, from accounting the pattern guy, stopping by my desk with a plant clipping. Sansevieria, he said. Hard to kill. It will outlive us all. Owen, I said. Do you think I'm selfish? He stared at me like numbers. You spend your yes on things you don't choose. That's not selfish. That's unsorted. He tilted his head. You're sorting. Validator right there. 3 days before move-out, Aunt Nora texted, "Can you send the deposit for the cruise by Friday, so we lock the cabins?" The group rate expires. She added a sparkle heart as if that softened anything. I didn't respond. She texted again. Hello? I put my phone face down and wrapped my grandmother's spoon in a dish towel. The spoon had a dent in the bowl from years of stirring beans. It fit my hand like memory. I slipped it into a box labeled Kitchen Keep and taped it shut tight. The night before the movers arrived, I went for a walk. My neighborhood held its breath in winter air. A kid tried to launch a paper plane in a scarf that swallowed his face. The plane dove. He laughed anyway. I envied the way kids fail without shame. They try again. No spreadsheets, no group chats. Back home, I opened my banking app. My thumb hovered. The transfers stacked there like little siphons. Mortgage support. Torres. Dylan Gas weekly. Tessa Emergency Fund monthly. Family phone plan top-up I'd somehow become the captain of. Each had a toggle. Each toggle was a switch to my peace. Tomorrow, I told the screen. When I'm gone. Morning came ruthless and gray. The movers boxed the bed I once thought I'd share with someone who saw me. The stove hissed hello, then goodbye. I cleaned the fridge like I was erasing a version of myself. Nina drove behind the moving truck, honking every time I looked like I might cry. At the airport, I touched the boarding pass like a passport. C. 3 letters. A new life. Nina hugged me hard enough to bruise doubt. Text me when you land, she said. I want proof your lungs like pine trees. They already do, I said. Seattle smelled like rain, even when it wasn't raining. The corporate apartment had too much white furniture and a view of a brick wall I weirdly loved. I opened the windows. The air felt wet and clean. I set Owen's plant on the sill. It looked like a spear pointing up. Harper met me the next morning with coffee and a stack of floor plans. We toured spaces and picked one with light even on gray days. I interviewed candidates and heard my own voice, steady and sure. I was making choices that didn't require anyone's permission. In between meetings, I found a small house to rent with a patch of yard. The yard had a stubborn rhododendron and a strip of dirt that asked for tomatoes. I signed the lease and bought a kettle. You can live anywhere with a kettle. On day 5, after the last contractor left and the silence settled, I opened my banking app again. This time I didn't hover. Toggle off, mortgage support off. Toggle off, Dylan Gas off. Toggle off, Tessa Fund off. Toggle off, family phone top-up off. Each click felt like stitching a seam I'd ripped years ago. I closed the app, exhaled. The kettle clicked off. I poured water over a tea bag and listened to the gentle hiss. My phone started buzzing before the tea turned amber. Unknown numbers. Then a number I knew by heart because childhood car rides had drilled it into me home. I let it ring out. It lit up again, then again. Voicemail pings stacked like hail. On the 4th try, the word Mom filled my screen. The tea steamed under my nose. The plant on the windowsill looked like a green hand held up in warning. I watched the phone vibrate across the table until it stopped. A text arrived, just 1 sentence. The bank called. What did you do? I set the phone down gently. Then I did what I always do when my hands want to shake. I made a list. Breathe. Do not explain. Keep the boundary. Brew another cup. The phone started again. Dad, then Dylan, then Tessa. Calls, then texts, questions, demands. A screenshot of a past transfer circled in red as if I owed them a reason like I owed them receipts. I slipped the phone into a drawer and shut it like you close a door on a draft. Outside, Seattle glowed with small, steady lights. People in jackets walked dogs that knew exactly who they belonged to. A train horn cut the evening in half and stitched it back together. I leaned on the frame of the open window and let the cool air touch my face. Tomorrow I'd hire an office manager. Tomorrow I'd buy tomatoes I couldn't kill. Tomorrow I'd go to a hardware store and ask someone who loves aisles to show me where they keep courage. But tonight I stood still. The last favor I ever did was for me. The first voicemail sounded calm. Mila, it's Mom. The mortgage draft failed. The bank says there's no transfer. Call me. The second had an edge. Mila, it's your father. This is unacceptable. Call your mother back. By the fifth, everyone had taken a turn. Dylan, rent's due. You know this. Tessa, my card payment bounced. Fix it. Aunt Nora, we need the cruise deposit tonight or we lose the cabins. I told them you're good for it. I set the phone on the counter and let it hum against the wood. The kettle clicked. I poured water. Steam rose. I breathed through it. I didn't answer any of them. 10 minutes later, a private number. I let it go. Another private number. Declined. Then home again, then Mom, then Tessa, then Aunt Nora. I slid the phone into the drawer with the tea bags and shut it. Counter clean, mind quieter. At the office, I kept moving. Interviews at 9 and 10. A contractor walkthrough at 11. Harper met me in the shell space with a hard hat and a grin. You're good at this, she said, stepping around tape lines. You make choices. People trust that. I used to make choices for everyone else, I said. I'm practicing making them for me. She nodded like the truth fit. Need anything? Just time on the calendar, I said, and a door that closes. Back at my temporary desk, the calls found me another way. The front desk pinged my Slack. Your mom and a woman named Nora are asking for you. They say it's urgent. My stomach dropped. Here I typed. Phone call. They asked for the Seattle office. They didn't know your extension. I typed, please don't transfer personal calls. Say I'm unavailable. Got it, the receptionist replied. A beat later, they asked if you really work here. I pictured it. My mother confirming I was real, like I was a rumor she wanted to correct. I texted Nina. They found the office number. She replied in one ping. Lock down your socials, update privacy, freeze your credit just in case. I'll send a checklist. Anchor behavior. I love her for it. By lunch, the drawer full of tea bags buzzed itself open. I pulled the phone out and set it face down. Curiosity won. I played one voicemail, then another. Mom again, voice thin. We stopped by your apartment. A man opened the door. He says you moved. Where are you? You can't run away from family. Dad's voice came next, flat with anger he thought sounded like logic. We signed a commitment for those cruise cabins because you said yes. Don't humiliate us. I paused the playback. I never said yes. Not once. They'd spent a yes I never gave. A text came from an unknown number. This is Leah, cousin. Please don't block. I hesitated. Leah was Dad's niece. We'd messaged once a year if that. She never asked for money, I replied. What's up? Her texts came in quick bursts like breathless speech. Aunt Carmen is telling people you promised the cruise and then bailed to punish them. She told my mom you flipped. They're embarrassed. They asked us for short-term loans to hold the cabins. Also, I'm sorry to tell you this, but Tessa posted a screenshot in the family group your salary band from LinkedIn circled. She said you wouldn't even feel it. I told them that was out of line. They didn't listen. Heat crawled up my neck. I stared at the message until the words blurred. Thanks for telling me, I wrote. Please don't pass along anything from me. I'm not engaging. Understood, she typed. I'm not on their side. Just thought you should know what story is out there. I put the phone down and stared at Owen's plant on the sill. Sansevieria, spear leaves, unbothered by the weather. At 3, Harper tapped my door. You good? I must have looked like a person trying to look like a person. My family is loud right now, I said. They called the desk. They might call our old office too. Harper's face softened. If they call here again, the front desk knows to filter it. If they show up, security will handle it. You don't owe me details. You owe me boundaries so you can do your job. You're giving me those. We're fine. Validator right there in a blazer and boots. After work, rain stitched the air. I walked to a hardware store because I promised myself I'd go. I bought a small trowel and a packet of tomato seeds that looked like only hope would make them sprout. The guy at the register wore a name tag that said Gem and told me tomatoes like patience and water that's not cold. I'm learning both, I said. Back home, I moved Owen's plant to the kitchen so I'd see green while I made tea. I boiled water. I didn't check my phone. When I finally looked, a text from Aunt Nora sat at the top like a crown. I put down a $2,000 deposit on my card because you were busy. It's non-refundable. I'll bring you the receipt to reimburse. Don't make me regret defending you. Defending me against what the rumor she helped seed. I typed a sentence and deleted it. I typed a second one and deleted that too. I settled on the truest thing I could write. Stop contacting me. Do not call my employer. Do not come to my home. She replied with a paragraph about sacrifice and gratitude and how we raised you. Then a final jab. Money changes people. She wasn't wrong. It had changed me. It had made me brave enough to leave. 2 days passed like weather gray damp, beautiful in a way you only see if you look for it. I hired an office manager named Jay, who color codes spreadsheets and laughs with his whole face. I toured one more potential space for the team and marked X's where sofas might go. I learned which cafe near the office gives writers their favorite table, and I claimed it as my morning spot with a black coffee and a notebook. The calls slowed, then spiked again on Friday evening. I made the mistake of opening the family group chat I'd left. I shouldn't have been able to see it, but Tessa had set it to public when she posted a photo of the cruise ship. I read comments from cousins I barely knew. I read Aunt Nora's reply to someone named Marge Mila just needs time. She's sensitive. There it was, the family label they'd pasted on me since I was 12. Sensitive, as if felt was a flaw, as if no was drama, as if money had to be their glue. Saturday morning, my neighbor in Seattle, a woman with silver hair and a pit mix named Birch, caught me watering the rhododendron. Saw lights late last night, she said. You okay? Phone trouble, I said, then snorted at how small that sounded. She shrugged one hand on Birch's head. I had a brother who used to show up only when he was broke. It took me a decade to learn I could love him without rescuing him. She pointed at the dirt strip. Plant basil next to the tomatoes. They like company. The innocent in my story wasn't her. It was Birch who leaned on my shin like I was already part of his rotation. By noon, the voicemails shifted from urgent to frantic to angry to pleading. Then a new tone performative. Mom, brittle sweet. We had to cancel the cruise. Everyone's devastated. I hope you're happy. Dad clipped, you're not the only one with feelings. Dylan Fast, can you at least send me the car insurance for this month, just this month? Tessa Icy, you're punishing us. It's cruel. Then a quieter one. A pause. A voice I hadn't heard in years, Uncle Paul stripped of the sunglasses swagger. Kiddo, he said, I've been where your dad is. Pride makes you say stupid things. You don't owe anybody a vacation. Call if you want. Or don't. Live your life. I saved that one. Proof not everyone in a family is the same person wearing different hats. Late afternoon, the bell rang. 2 short, 1 long. Not the mail, not a delivery. My heart climbed my ribs like a ladder. I checked the peephole. Empty porch. I opened the door a crack and found a padded envelope on the mat with my old address crossed out and the new one written in a neat hand I knew by heart. Mom's. Back inside, I sliced the tape and slid out a stack of photos. Birthdays, 4th of July sparklers, me with braces cutting a sheet cake shaped like a book, me in a gown that was more curtain than dress cap askew, Mom holding my face like she'd won a prize. On top of the stack a note, Mila. You are being dramatic. You think money equals control. It doesn't. We are your family and we decide things together. You don't get to make unilateral decisions that affect us all. We forgave your tone at dinner. We'll forgive this too. Come home and let's reset before the holidays get ruined. Mom, I read it 3 times. Every sentence proved the opposite of what she wanted it to prove. We decide together. You don't get to decide. Forgive your tone. Forgive this too. I put the photos back in the envelope and slid it into a drawer with the spare batteries. That night, Leah texted again. Heads up, they're talking about flying out. Tessa thinks she found your neighborhood on Zillow from the background of your plant picture. I told them to leave you alone. They don't listen to me. I looked around my little kitchen. The window, the brick wall, Owen's plant holding steady, a flash of my own post on my private account steam from a cup, a smudge of brick 2 leaves in frame. I had left breadcrumbs. Not for them. For me. But they followed. I typed thanks. Then if they come, I won't open the door, but the knocking will be loud. Want me to call if I hear they left, she wrote. Yes, small help, large comfort. Sunday was quiet until it wasn't. I baked banana bread because my hands needed work. I measured, stirred, scraped the bowl with my grandmother's spoon. The oven warmed the room. The smell had its own memory. For a moment, I was just a person who liked making bread. Then 3 hard knocks. Fast, authoritative. I froze. Another 3 louder. I stood, wiped my hands, and walked to the door. I didn't look through the peephole. I knew the shape of those knocks. Open up, my father said, voice muffled by wood. We flew across the country for you. The least you can do is open the door. My heart tried to run. My feet stayed. Mila Mom's voice tight. We're not leaving until we talk. Neighbors will think we're crazy. I glanced at Birch's house. Curtains didn't move. Rain thickened the air like a curtain of its own. I pressed my palm to the door. Solid. Cool. This was the line. The hinge. The moment where the past rattled and the future stood still waiting. I unlocked the deadbolt. Then I stopped. I slid the chain across instead and cracked the door the width of 2 fingers. "Hi," I said. My voice surprised me. It was steady, like a note held by someone who'd practiced alone. Mom leaned in, eyes shiny, hair frizzed by rain. Dad hovered behind her jaw-set suit jacket, wrinkled from travel. "We need to talk inside," Mom said, pushing gently. The chain held. "No," I said. "We can talk right here." She blinked, thrown by a boundary that wasn't up for debate. "We're your parents," Dad said. "We deserve respect." "You'll get respect," I said. "You won't get control." Rain tapped the soffit. Somewhere a train moaned. My neighbor's dog barked once and went quiet. Mom pressed her lips together. "This is embarrassing." "For who?" I asked. "For us," she said. "Not for me. Not for the daughter they uninvited from Christmas. For them." Behind them, a figure in a red coat shifted from one foot to the other. Tessa. She lifted a hand in a small wave, then looked away. "Let us in," Dad said. His voice tried to be gentle and landed on command. "No," I said again. "You came across the country to tell me the same thing you wrote in that note. I heard you. This is my answer. I am not your ATM. I will not fund vacations. I will not keep paying your bills. I won't explain it again." Mom's eyes filled. "We're drowning." "You're capable," I said. "You just preferred me doing it." Tessa spoke, then soft. "We lost the deposit." "I'm sorry," I said, and meant it in the way you mean it when the weather ruins a picnic. I was sorry for their discomfort. I wasn't sorry for my decision. Dad's voice rose. "We're your family." "And I'm your daughter," I said, "not your plan." For a long beat, no one spoke. Rain softened. The world exhaled. "We can stand here all night," Mom said finally. "No," I said. "You can't." I closed the door gently to the chain. My hands shook. I slid the chain back, locked both locks, and stepped away. Knuckles hit wood, hard, again. I picked up the banana bread pan with oven mitts and set it on the stove. I cut a slice while the door rattled and the past pounded and my pulse tried to sprint out of my skin. I ate warm bread and stared at the envelope with the photos in the drawer. I wasn't cold, I wasn't cruel. I was choosing. The knocking stopped. Silence pooled. Then a new sound. The slow crumple of paper, the slip of something under the door. A spreadsheet, color-coded. Totals circled in red. They'd hauled a printed budget across the country. At the bottom, in my mother's hand, "You owe us." On the back, smaller letters, Tessa's "Please talk to me." Alone. I wrote 3 lines and slid them under their door, Café Marin. 10 a.m. tomorrow. Come alone. 30 minutes. If Mom or Dad show up, I leave. I slept in pieces. Morning gray and clean found me at a window table. The espresso machine hissed. A kid in yellow boots stomped a puddle. Tessa arrived at 9:58 in a red coat alone. She set a thin folder on the table screenshots. "Aunt Nora. If we present it as a done deal, she'll fold. Mom. Add something silly so she doesn't spiral." So the jester hats were a tactic. Christmas sit this one out, drafted in advance. Call her boss. Fake a wellness check. A cruise receipt with my name on the contact line, just a placeholder. "I didn't write that," I said. "I know," Tessa said. "She did. She kept them from crashing our meeting." Then plain, "Can you help with the house just to catch up?" "I can't," I said. "I won't." She nodded. She'd told them I'd say that. She slid me my old library card. "For your box," she said. "Freeze your credit," she added. "Mom thinks there's still a card somewhere." I went home and did it. Freezes, password changes, banknotes. Minutes later, a text from Mom, a photo of a bent, expired card. "We'll run the mortgage once. Love you." I sent a cease and desist. Nina notarized it. We left copies at the motel. The front desk clerk disappeared behind staff only and reemerged with a small salute. Done. By noon, a wellness check. "I'm fine," I told the officers. They're upset I stopped paying their bills. They nodded, told my family to leave. At work, with security beside me, I handed my parents final envelopes. No employer contact, no cards, no home visits, writing only. 6 months of no asks and proof of counseling. "I won't fund the house." "Money didn't change me," I said. "It revealed us." That night, a 5-line note from my dad. He'd heard me, he'd keep Nora off the phone. Tessa texted, "Plant basil deep." I labeled a pot basil. "Try again," and set every family number to silent. December brought moss paint walls, 3 new clients, a small potluck mom's halting apology, and a photo of my parents sitting with a counseling worksheet. I slept through the night. The boundary held. Story 3. My sister sent me a wedding registry with a mansion, 2 luxury cars, a Rolex, and a cash fund. When I only chose one, she said, "Pick them all or don't come." That's when I canceled everything. My name is Nora, and this all started just 5 months after my husband Ethan passed away. He was 56, 15 years older than me, but he was my soulmate. We met when I was 23, me just starting out in teaching, him already running a growing architectural firm. We married quickly, and for nearly 2 decades we built a life filled with love, laughter, and eventually a son, Leo, now 20, and studying computer science on the West Coast. Ethan fought leukemia for almost 3 years. I left my full-time job during that time to be his caregiver. Watching someone fade away day after day changes you in ways you can't explain. I was there when he took his final breath, holding my hand against his chest, as if refusing to let go. After the funeral, I discovered just how much Ethan had left me. He had been careful planning for me and Leo. There was our main home in a quiet suburb we'd lived in for 12 years, a downtown condo we once rented out, a small cabin near the mountains where we'd escape on weekends, 2 cars, a Jaguar and a Lexus, and a little over $2 million spread across accounts. I promised myself 2 things keep our home because it carried too many memories to abandon and protect Ethan's legacy for Leo's future. Marriage. Number Ethan was my one great love. I wasn't looking to replace him. Instead, I poured energy into a foundation for leukemia research and took on part-time consulting. Work gave me routine and volunteering gave me meaning. Everything was steady until one Sunday morning when my parents called. Mom's voice was bright but firm. "Sweetheart, we need to talk about your sister." Emily. She's my little sister, 10 years younger, at 31, the so-called star of the family. She'd always been the pretty one, the carefree one, the one my parents adored. Growing up, I was the serious one while Emily was the golden girl, and now she was getting married to her fiancé, Chris. Dad chimed in. "They're planning something really special and, well, weddings cost a fortune. We thought you might help out." I sighed, already sensing where this was going. "Okay, I'll talk to her." When I called Emily, she squealed like a teenager. "Nora." "Oh my God, I'm so glad you called. Did Mom tell you the wedding is going to be magical?" For the next 20 minutes, she rattled off her vision of full ceremony at the Grand Oaks Country Club, 200 guests, a designer gown from Milan, a live orchestra, a luxury car rental for the bridal party, the whole production. "Emily," I interrupted gently, "that sounds beautiful, but do you know how much this is going to cost?" She laughed. "That's why I'm calling you. I mean, you have more than enough now." There it was. The entitlement laid bare. I kept my voice calm. "I'll give you $40,000 for the wedding. That's a very generous gift. The rest you and Chris can figure out with his parents and Mom and Dad." Her excitement deflated instantly. 40. "That's it." "Yes, Emily, that's it." She mumbled thanks and hung up, clearly unsatisfied. I followed through, immediately set up a separate account, put $40,000 in it, and gave Emily limited access. At Sunday dinner, I announced it in front of everyone. "That's my wedding gift, $40,000. The rest is up to you." My parents exchanged disapproving glances, but I stood firm. For weeks afterward, I thought things had settled. I focused on Leo's updates from college. He'd joined a robotics team, made good friends, even had a crush on a girl in his dorm. My charity work kept me busy. Life felt manageable again. Then, one Tuesday morning, while sipping coffee, I opened an email from Emily. The subject line read, "Wedding gift list, confirm ASAP." I wasn't prepared for what I saw. The list wasn't flowers or a blender or even an expensive honeymoon. It was 5 outrageous items. The downtown condo, the Jaguar, the mountain cabin, Ethan's Rolex, which he wore every single day, a 2-week honeymoon in Bora Bora, first-class flights included. I blinked, thinking I'd misread it. But no, it was exactly what it looked like. My sister had turned her wedding registry into a demand for property worth over $1 million. I felt heat rising in my chest. Of all things, the Rolex cut the deepest. Ethan had worn it through chemo, through board meetings, through our son's childhood milestones. I had always planned to give it to Leo when he graduated. Part of me wanted to call Emily and unleash the fury boiling inside me, but I knew how it would go. She'd cry, Mom and Dad would call within the hour, and I'd be painted the villain. So instead, I stared at that list for a long time, remembering every moment of my life when Emily's needs were placed above mine. When I was 16 and working 2 part-time jobs, most of my paycheck went to her dance lessons. When I got into college, my parents barely celebrated. They were too busy fussing over Emily's latest recital. And when I got married, I paid for my entire wedding alone, because as Mom said at the time, well, Ethan can afford it. Why would we help? Now here she was, grown woman engaged, still expecting me to hand over everything. I closed the laptop, sat back, and whispered to myself, this ends now. When I finally replied to Emily's outrageous email, I chose my words carefully. Emily, I've already given you $40,000 for the wedding. That was my gift. However, I'm willing to also pay for your honeymoon trip to Bora Bora. That's my final offer. I figured maybe that would quiet her. I closed my laptop, trying to breathe away the anger. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed with her response. That's not how this works, Nora. I need all of these things, not just one. Pick them all or don't bother showing up. I read the message 3 times, disbelief morphing into fury. She wasn't asking anymore, she was demanding. I dialed her number immediately. She answered on the second ring, her voice already defensive. Nora, why are you making this so hard? You have everything. I have nothing. I tried to keep calm. Emily, do you even hear yourself? You're asking me to hand over property worth hundreds of thousands of dollars plus Dad's watch. That Rolex is going to Leo, not you. Her tone shifted shrill. But I'm getting married. This is supposed to be the happiest time of my life. Don't you want to help your little sister? You have plenty with the $40,000. Most people would be grateful for that. There was a pause. Then she dropped the hammer. Fine. Either you give me all 5 things on that list or don't bother coming to my wedding. My stomach turned. You're giving me an ultimatum over money. You don't understand, she snapped. It's not even your money. Ethan died and left you everything. You didn't earn it. You just got lucky. Your sick husband kicked the bucket. Her words cut like knives. My hands shook. She wasn't just insulting me, she was spitting on Ethan's memory. Don't you ever talk about Ethan like that again, I whispered. Then I hung up. For a few moments I sat frozen in silence. The rage bubbling in my chest finally broke through. I opened my banking app and revoked her access to the wedding account. Then I called every vendor she'd paid with that money and canceled each deposit, the venue, the caterer, the florist, all of it. Within 20 minutes, Emily's dream wedding had collapsed. The next morning, when I turned my phone back on, it exploded with notifications. 39 missed calls, dozens of texts. Emily's messages started frantic. What did you do then? Spiraled into rage. You ruined my wedding. This is my money. You're a vindictive witch, and Mom and Dad are going to make you fix this. Then came messages from my parents. Call us immediately. This is unacceptable. I didn't answer. Instead, I went out to my garden. Ethan and I had planted roses there 3 years earlier. As I pulled weeds, I whispered to him, I did it, love. I finally cut her off. But peace didn't last. That evening, I heard cars pulling into my driveway. I looked out the window, my parents' silver sedan, and Emily's white SUV. They didn't knock. Emily stormed in, still holding the spare key I'd once trusted her with. My parents followed, faces tight with fury. Emily pointed at me. Give me back the account access, now. I stood still, voice low. No. Mom stepped forward, using my full name like I was still 12. Nora Ann, enough games. Fix this immediately. Your sister's wedding is in 3 months. I didn't ruin her wedding. She did that when she demanded my condo, my cabin, Ethan's Rolex. I was upset, Emily cried. You were being selfish. Then I turned to my parents. You knew about her list, didn't you? Mom's lips tightened. Of course. I helped her make it. You've been living comfortably all these years because of Ethan. It's your responsibility to help your sister get her start. My chest felt like it might split open. Responsibility. You think my job is to hand over everything Ethan worked for? Dad crossed his arms. Emily deserves a good wedding and a solid start in life. You have more than enough to share. I looked at the 3 of them standing in my living room, demanding that I carve up my husband's legacy like a buffet. Get out, I said quietly. Emily's face twisted. You're just jealous because I'm getting married and you'll be alone forever. Out now. You wouldn't dare kick us out, Dad sneered. I picked up my phone and dialed 911 in front of them. Only then did they storm out, slamming the door behind them. That should have been the end, but it wasn't. The following weeks, my phone rang nonstop. Aunts, uncles, cousins, every one of them parroting the same message: you're selfish. Family comes first. Help your sister. Even Aunt Karen, who had always been my closest ally, sighed over the phone. Nora, honey. I know Emily can be a bit demanding, but she's the baby. You've always been the strong one. You can afford to help her. I asked sharply. Would you give your house away? Well, no, but your situation is different. Different. Always different when it came to Emily. I stopped answering family calls altogether. My phone became blissfully quiet until one day Leo called, his voice shaking. Mom, Grandma called me. My heart dropped. What did she say? She said if I don't convince you to help Aunt Emily, she's going to disown me. She said she won't help with college anymore, and I won't be welcome at family gatherings. My hands clenched into fists. Leo, listen to me. Your grandmother isn't paying for your college. I am. She has no power over you. I told him everything: the list, Emily's ultimatum, the disgusting words about Ethan, the fact that my parents had helped her make the list. Leo was quiet for a while. Then he said, Mom, if they'd cut me off just because you won't give away Dad's things, then maybe I don't want a relationship with them anyway. Tears blurred my eyes. My son, only 20, had more sense than the rest of my family combined. I love you, Leo. I love you too, Mom. And I think Dad would be proud of you. That night, lying in bed, I stared at Ethan's photo on my nightstand. For the first time in months, I didn't feel crushed by grief. I felt something sharper, stronger. I whispered to the picture, I'm not letting them win. But I had no idea how much uglier it was going to get. They didn't argue with me after that night. They rewrote me. It started with whispers I wasn't meant to hear. A cousin posted a vague status about selfish widows hoarding wealth. An aunt commented, family comes first, some people forget. My name wasn't there, but everyone knew. My phone pinged with screenshots. Maya, my friend from the foundation, sent them with a single line. I'm on your side. In the family group chat, Mom had typed. Nora's grief made her unstable. We're worried. She canceled everything to punish Emily. Dad added. Ethan would want Nora to share. She's refusing basic decency. Basic decency. As if protecting my son's future was indecent. I stayed silent. Silence isn't weakness. Sometimes it's aim. That afternoon, the wedding planner emailed me directly. Caroline, we'd never spoken. Hi, Nora. I hope you're all right. I'm reaching out because your mother told me you'd be signing the condo over as part of the wedding blessing. She scheduled a deed signing at the rehearsal dinner. I just wanted to confirm since vendors are planning around it. I closed my eyes and counted to 10. Then I wrote back, there will be no deed signing, no transfer. Please forward any communication where my name is used to promise assets. 15 minutes later, my inbox lit up with a chain. Mom to Caroline, Emily CC'd. The words were neat and cheerful. We're delighted to announce Nora's big surprise for the couple title paperwork for the downtown condo. Please prepare a small moment on the program. A surprise. For my property. Announced by someone else. I saved the thread. I printed it. I put a copy in a blue folder labeled Evidence, a habit from caregiving paper first, then feelings. 2 days passed. Emily's campaign grew. She told relatives I had promised the watch to her as a blessing for fertility. She said I changed my mind because I hate seeing her happy. The lies spread because people wanted them to be true. It's easier to resent a boundary than to build your own. Then Chris texted. Hi, Nora, it's Chris. I know you don't owe me anything, but can we talk? I think some things happened behind my back. I stared at the message. He'd sent only once before after the wedding photos to be polite. I called him. His voice was cautious. I just found an email from your mom. She wrote to me a month ago about integrating assets. She told me to ask Emily to be firm with you. She also said if you get dramatic to say you're dishonoring Ethan's memory by refusing. I swallowed. She used Ethan's name. She did. He cleared his throat. I didn't know about the list. I thought the registry was normal. I promise. Chris, I said quietly, you're marrying into a system. Please be clear about what you're willing to be part of. He sighed. I'm trying. When we hung up, I printed his forwarded email and slipped it into the blue folder. Validator, I thought. Not perfect, but finally someone who wasn't pretending. 16, working the evening shift at the grocery store, the one with scuffed linoleum and a price gun that left faint ink freckles on my fingers. I bagged produce by color so it looked pretty on the belt. Mr. Avery, the manager with coffee breath and kind eyes, would slow walk past the time clock at 9:58 p.m. and whisper, Take your time, because he'd seen the geometry book bulging my backpack. He'd let me clock the extra 8 minutes, never 10 enough to matter on a paycheck that month. At home, Mom flipped the envelope open at the kitchen table before I'd even hung my jacket. "Emily's recital fees are due," she said, already writing the check. "You're the strong one." It landed like praise and assignment in the same breath. Emily bounced in trailing glitter and the smell of hairspray twirling to show me a rhinestone sewn crooked. I smiled and fixed it, because that's what the strong one did. 23, graduating with honors in a stadium that smelled like sunscreen and new beginnings. I wore the gold cord that said I'd stayed up when others slept. Dad hugged me for exactly 3 seconds, his cologne sharp, his shirt crisp, his love careful. "Don't go on about the scholarships in front of Emily," he murmured into my hair. "It makes her feel small." I laughed like it was nothing, then folded my pride as neatly as the program in my hand. That night, Mom posted a photo from the ceremony with a caption about our girls, plural, a soft focus on family that blurred the fact that only one of us had sprinted the academic marathon. I let it be. Being the strong one meant not needing the credit. 27, my wedding day. I paid the venue deposit with a pen. I almost snapped, wrote checks for flowers and chairs and a cake that hid a seam with frosting. "Ethan has money," Mom said when I asked if they wanted to contribute anything ceremonial, even a toast. Why would we help? So I covered every bill, tucked the receipts like petals into a folder I didn't know would one day become a shield. I didn't complain. I thought love earns love. I was wrong. The kettle clicked itself off. The kitchen smelled like lemon soap and last night's toast. I braced my palms on the counter and let the cool laminate ground me. My chest felt like stone, a weight I couldn't exhale. Morning brought something else, an official window envelope with the DMV seal and the particular gravity of government paper. I slid a butter knife under the flap. "Notice, duplicate title request, Jaguar VN ####." The letter sat in my mailbox like a small, obedient bomb. Window envelope, state seal in the corner, the kind of cheap fibrous paper that scuffs if you look at it too hard. Inside, the language was precise and drained of personality. "Your application will process in 7-10 business days," it said. Application? Process. Business days. The return address was my house. The contact email was not mine. I read it 3 times slower each pass, like the speed might change the meaning. It didn't. My fingers tightened. The paper gave and creased along my grip, a white scar splitting the printed line. Emily had kept a spare key once, back when I thought closeness was the same as safety, back when I'd tuck my bag on a chair, rinse a mug at the sink, and say, "Go grab whatever you need from the office, because that's what family does." She'd known which drawer held the registrations, the file tabs I'd labeled in a neat row, taxes, insurance, title, because I liked order and believed order made me safe. She must have photographed the Jaguar registration in that quiet domestic gap while I frothed milk and believed in people. Now she was trying to convert a picture into ownership. The audacity of turning a snapshot into a deed. I carried the letter to the kitchen table and made a small clearing with the heel of my hand pushed back. A salt shaker straightened the coaster. Aligned the blue folder parallel to the table edge. Then I picked up the phone. The DMV queue dragged me into its aquarium. Muted jazz burbled under a cheerful robot promising shorter wait times during non-peak hours. "Your call matters to us," said a man whose voice had been recorded in a different decade. I sat there and listened to strangers on the other end of other lines being helped first. That's what hold music is, the sound of someone else's urgency moving ahead of yours. Agent Morales answered on the 4th transfer voice, bright, but not brittle. "Motor vehicles. This is Morales. How can I help you today?" I gave him the letter's reference number, and calm as I could told him I had not requested a duplicate title. You could hear him straighten. "Okay, let's lock this down." We tangoed through verification license number, last 4 of the VIN, address history, and then those sideways identity questions that only someone who has paid attention to her own life can answer. "Which of these streets have you lived on? Which bank held your auto loan in 2019? I got them right. Of course I did. "Thank you," he said, fingers clacking. "I'm placing a fraud alert on the title record and freezing changes pending investigation. Any attempts will flag and route to the enforcement desk. You'll get an email confirmation within the hour and a physical letter within 5 to 7 days. Keep both. Don't discard anything, even envelopes. Understood. I repeated the case number back to him until it felt memorized, then wrote it on a sticky note and pressed it onto the blue folder's cover like a new vertebra the spine of my life reinforced. Life. When the call ended, I didn't sit and ruminate. I stood up and moved. Sometimes motion is the only proof you still own your body. The locksmith's shop was a narrow, competent space that smelled like brass and solvent. Blank keys hung in dense, bright forests behind the counter. A bell chimed when I entered the sound, near and old-fashioned. 3 locks, I said. Front-back garage? Today. He nodded. Didn't ask for a story, just grabbed a clipboard and a tool roll. On the drive back, he explained options, pin and tumbler versus high-security restricted keyways, rekeying versus replacing like a person who believes in the dignity of making things work. We chose restricted keys. He spun cylinders with the practiced flick of someone who's met every kind of disaster at a threshold. The new deadbolts seated with satisfying final clicks. I changed the alarm code from Ethan's birthday to a string of numbers. Only my fingers knew a rhythm they would remember after my head forgot. Then I added eyes. 2 cameras, one watching the driveway, one covering the back gate. The installer, a patient man with forearms like rope, walked me through the app. Green light means online. Clips right to the card in the cloud. Power cut. They still push out. He tightened a bracket and smiled without comfort. It's not about catching, he said. It's about deterrence. Deterrence works on the deterrable, I said before I could stop myself. He paused, met my eyes, and nodded. Then it's about proof. After lunch, I drove to the bank with the Rolex ticking like a small heart in its velvet pouch. The safe deposit corridor was colder than necessary intentionally, so I think to cue seriousness. The manager swiped us through 2 doors and ushered me to a narrow booth. She slid the metal drawer open with a smooth ceremonial motion and stepped back as if I might need privacy to meet my own precaution. I set the watch inside and felt ridiculous for the shake in my hands. Ethan had saved for it through 3 lean winter's commission checks stretched into months of layaway because having something solid on his wrist made bad news less slippery. I wrote the box number twice on the official form and in my notebook then photographed both for an encrypted folder. Belt, suspenders, and a floor that doesn't collapse. Back in the car, I texted Leo, all good, small hiccup, I love you. The phone rang before the typing bubbles had time to breathe. You sound steady, he said. I'm choosing to be steady. I can fly home if you want. Not yet, midterms, I've got this. He didn't argue. The quiet on his end, clean, respectful, made room for my own voice to sound certain. Next step, counsel. Anika Patel, Estates and Fraud. Her office was an ordered grid matte black frames around diplomas plants that looked watered on a schedule, a glass pen cup with exactly 4 pens, printer toner and good coffee braided into a scent I associate with competence. She didn't interrupt. She let the story spool dates, names, passwords. I had changed passwords, I still needed to change the letter. The cameras, the watch, the way fear had made my hands clumsy for exactly 23 minutes and then left. When I finished, she held out her hand. The blue folder. I slid it over. She read with her mouth set, not grim, just engaged, her eyes moving like a scanner line. She clicked her pen, a small declarative sound. Here's what we're doing. 1, county owner alert enrollment so deed filings ping us within minutes, not days. 2, motor vehicle holds already placed. We'll add certified notices to DMV and your insurer so no release happens without wet ink signature. 3, cease and desist letters to your parents and sister regarding any representation that your assets are available to them. Clear, specific, and trackable. 4, if anyone attempts to access funds, we notify law enforcement and civil counsel immediately, no more warnings. 5, relocate sentimental and high-risk items to the bank. Grief is the thief's favorite cover. And 6, she added, ticking a finger, she hadn't initially raised credit monitoring and freezes with the bureaus. USPS informed delivery so mail tampering pings you, and a password hardening session. We closed the side doors and the dog doors both. Will this stop them? My voice surprised me by being small. It will slow them, she said, looking right at me, and it will document them. People like this don't stop at a line unless the line is electrified. My shoulders dropped like someone had cut a string. Electrify it. We sent the letters that afternoon. Certified mail signature required no euphemisms. The clerk stamped each green card with a heavy thunk, the sound of a boundary made visible. I took photos of tracking numbers and slid receipts into the blue folder. Paper armor. Then the week went quiet, in the eeriest way. No group chat fireworks, no mother's committee emails, CCing me on family matters, no late night, can you talk texts. Quiet can be peace. It can also be the held breath of a person about to dive. On Friday, the breath snapped. Owner alert, new document submitted for recording, quitclaim deed. Grantee Emily Hart and Christopher Hart. Grantor Nora Ann Graves. Property downtown condo parcel ###. My name, their names. A transfer I did not sign. The world tipped not enough to spill, just enough to slosh. I slid to the floor with the laptop open and read the email again and again until the letters blurred, then sharpened, refusing to rearrange into sense. When my legs listened again, I stood, grabbed my purse, and drove to the recorder's office. Motion as medicine. The lobby was aggressively neutral gray chairs, a ficus doing its best, a bulletin board of cheerful flyers about serious topics. The clerk wore a tie printed with tiny anchors, a private joke in a place where everyone is trying not to sink. He had that particular fatigue of someone who delivers bad news by procedure. I need a copy of the deed that was submitted, I said, sliding my ID across. My hands were steady. It felt like a miracle. He printed and handed it to me. The paper's weight surprised me the way fiction can feel heavier than truth. My signature stared up, except it wasn't mine. The G looped like a flourish I've never allowed myself. The cross on the T in Graves floated high, ambitious, or nervous. Someone had practiced. Someone had tried to become my hand. Heat rose in my throat. Breathing turned into a task. The clerk's voice anchored me. You can file a fraud affidavit. We'll flag it before recording. Call your attorney and the police. Thank you. I pressed my palm flat to the counter. The laminate was cool, perfectly clean, utterly indifferent. An uncomplicated fact in a day full of complications. Outside, the sky was offensively blue, the kind a painter would be accused of exaggerating. People moved with tote bags and iced coffee and plans for later. Their lives hummed in normal keys. Inside my chest, a small world burned to ash and then cooled into iron. I called Anika. She answered on the first ring. I'm on my way, she said. Do not call your family, not yet. We do this the clean way. Driving home, I passed the coffee shop where Ethan used to sketch floor plans on napkins, his pencil hopeful. I parked for exactly 1 minute and let the tears come quiet, efficient. Then I breathed and turned the key. The next right thing was waiting. My phone buzzed as I eased into the driveway. Motion detected, back gate. The thumbnail showed a body moving past the camera head down hoodie up, timestamp 2:17 p.m. One frame caught a loose ponytail escaping the hood. I knew that hair. Emily. I stepped out of the car and let stillness settle. Gravel clicked back into place under my shoes. The roses along the fence rustled, a practical little breeze sorting leaves. Somewhere a dog barked twice and stopped like even it was listening. Inside the house had that held breath feeling again. The alarm chirped once. I walked my loop entry living room kitchen, palming the familiar edges, the counter lip, the door jamb. Nick the movers left the cabinet that never closes on the first try. The safe opened obedient, documents in their sleeves, jewelry pouch sealed, keys sleeping in their dish by the door, one brass tooth bent just slightly from years of turning. Nothing out of place? Somehow that was worse. Violation with gloves on is still violation. At the table, I pulled the blue folder close. The corners were softened like a book that's been read too many times. I slid the deed copy into the stack, squared the edges, and wrote the date in the top right corner. Then, slow and neat, I wrote one sentence. They stopped asking. They started taking. The phone buzzed. County attempted deed flagged for fraud on hold pending investigation. Another buzz, Anika police report filed. Do not engage. Security company contact incoming. We will control this. I exhaled, and only then realized I'd been hoarding air like currency. The kitchen snapped into microscopic focus. Lemon soap, half-used sun caught in the meniscus. The shallow dent in the chair Ethan always claimed, the hairline crack spidering through the ceramic bowl painted with oranges, the tiny silver scratch on the doorframe where the movers once clipped it. ordinary things lit like evidence. I nudged the camera sensitivity up a notch, confirmed clips were writing to the cloud, forwarded the county notice to Anika with one word, received. The kettle clicked off. I hadn't realized I'd turned it on. I poured water I didn't drink and watched the steam thin into nothing. I wasn't scared now. Fear had been expensive, costing sleep judgment whole years I will never be paid back. I was done paying. This was never about a wedding. It was about a pattern I had fed because I thought love meant open doors and unlocked drawers. I had confused kindness with access apology, with repair urgency with importance. Not anymore. Story 4. By the end of that week, one hallway clip and a stack of boring documents helped trigger a voluntary asset recovery on a $308,000 SUV, froze a fraudulent line of credit someone opened using my name, and shut down the family dynamic that almost killed me. I am Stephanie, 32, VP of Marketing in New York City. I thought I understood betrayal. I thought it showed up in whispers and awkward silences. In my family, it wore smiles past plates and called me dramatic, while my oxygen levels crashed in front of 100 people on a Boston rooftop. Here is what they did not know. I keep receipts. Real ones. Spreadsheets. Transfers. Contracts. Screenshots. A permissioned Ring camera the venue manager let me mount in the service hallway for vendor coverage during my brother's gender reveal. I knew Massachusetts is a two-party consent state, so I never treated that audio as court evidence. It became context and leverage. The proof that mattered would be clinical records, EMT notes, bank forensics, and signatures that were not mine. If you have ever been the responsible one who pays the bill because it is easier than arguing, tell me where you are watching from. This part is for you. I am the responsible one. The planner. The fixer. The girl who left our Wellesley suburb on scholarships and side hustles, worked through school, and climbed to a Manhattan corner office. My team calls me steady hands. At home, I was the funding model. For 2 years, I wired about 40% of my take-home to keep the peace, roughly $14,000 a month, sometimes more when emergencies stacked up. I did it quietly because the golden child narrative needs a quiet counterweight, and in our family that was me. Names matter here. My father, Frank, loves a neat story and a golf tee time. My brother, Ryan, 27, is the idea guy. He says brand a lot and believes charisma closes deals. My Aunt Martha produces every family moment like an event. My sister, Jessica, thank God, sees me clearly. She is the first person who will say, "That happened the way you remember it." My best friend, Callie, is my anchor. She texts me water sleep and screenshot in the same sentence. I made 3 mistakes that looked like love. First, I normalized transferring thousands every month and called it help. I even tracked it in a spreadsheet so I could true up at year's end. That spreadsheet will matter later. Second, I agreed to finance a Lamborghini Urus for optics because Ryan swore it would impress potential partners. Title and loan in my name. Insurance policy in my name. He was supposed to be an occasional listed driver. In reality, he became the primary driver, which is a coverage problem and a contract problem. That distinction will matter too. Third, I never signed any paperwork to borrow against my father's house. If you hear the words home equity line of credit and my name in the same sentence, the next word is forged. The rooftop night should have been easy. Seaport skyline, caterers, a DJ with a playlist I over-approved. I ran logistics because that is what I do best. I had the vendor contracts in a folder and spare chargers in a tote. I mounted that little ring cam in the service corridor with the general manager's blessing so we could track deliveries away from guests. I thought I was protecting cupcakes from disappearing. I was protecting my life. And because I am a marketer, let me set expectations. This story is not a scream. It is a timeline. It is a clean line from sacrifice to betrayal to awakening to consequences. Every few minutes, something you need will land. I will flag it. I will say this is important, or we will come back to that. I am not being dramatic. I am being precise. Here is the setup you need before everything breaks. My salary can carry the numbers you are about to hear. The transfers were mine, the car was mine, the monthly support was mine, the cultural script was also mine, the capable daughter funds the fragile peace, while the golden son tries on futures. It looked familial. It functioned like a business with no books until I started keeping them. 2 more seeds to plant. I had already agreed with Jessica that if anything ever felt off, we would run facts, not feelings. Date, time, amount. We called it the timeline rule. And 2 weeks before the party, Callie said the sentence that would become my compass. If they joke about your boundaries, check what they get when you keep none. So when the night goes sideways, and you will know why I moved the way I did afterward. You will understand why the audio clip was useful, but not the anchor, why the lender moved quickly once I stopped payments under counsel and showed contract violations, and why a calm letter through an attorney accomplished more than 1,000 screaming texts ever could. If you have lived inside a family story that cost you money, health, and a little piece of your voice, stay with me. By the end of the week I'm about to walk you through, I did not get an apology. I got my name back. And I did it without losing control. Looking back now, the rooftop wasn't the beginning. It was the bill coming due. I grew up in Wellesley learning 2 lessons at the same time. Make things look easy. Pay for the mess. Aunt Martha lined up 5 kinds of mustard like we were staging a magazine shoot, and I learned presentation before I learned permission. Ryan got the golden child glide path. Charisma, big talk, late homework. I got the responsible child badge. Schedules, rides, essays in the passenger seat, while Jessica slept on my shoulder. That split became our family operating system. He cast the vision. I covered the invoice. I left for college on scholarships and side gigs. No one saw the night shifts or the spreadsheets. They saw the tassel and asked if I could put the flights to Hawaii on my card so we could celebrate properly. I said yes, because saying yes was the rent I paid for being the one who made it out. After grad school, I moved to New York, climbed from coordinator to VP in 8 years, and learned to speak fluent ROI. At home, success translated into a quiet monthly tithe. 40% of my take-home, give or take. About $14,000 a month, sometimes more when emergencies multiplied. 2 years of it adds up to a number you feel in your bones. I tracked every transfer in a sheet labeled family support line items with dates, memos, and confirmation numbers. It was my way of telling myself there would be an audit one day, even if I never scheduled it. Here's the pattern, clean and honest. Dad would forward property taxes with a winking emoji and a story about the town getting greedy this year. Aunt Martha would text a temporary gala deposit with a promise that my name would be on the donor wall. Ryan would ping me from a payment app at 11:14 p.m. with the caption, "Client dinner can reimburse next week." Reimbursements almost never arrived. The asks were wrapped in pride. "We're so proud of you. It would mean the world. You're so good at this." Pride was the bow. Entitlement was the box. I made 3 big concessions that paved the road to the rooftop. First, I normalized large transfers and called it helping. I even trued up at year's end like a decent bookkeeper of someone else's dream. Second, I agreed to finance a Lamborghini Urus for brand optics because Ryan insisted it would close partnerships. Title in my name. Loan in my name. Insurance policy in my name. To make it at least technically correct, I listed him as an occasional additional driver. Over time, occasional blurred into daily. That's not just a sibling boundary issue, it's an insurance and contract issue. Third and most dangerous, I allowed my name and credit to become the family's master key. I never signed anything related to borrowing against Dad's house, but my name had become shorthand for approval. If Stephanie's on it, it's solid. That sentence is how forgeries get justified over brunch. Looking back now, the golden child versus scapegoat dynamic wasn't cartoonish. It was polite. Ryan wasn't a villain twirling a mustache. He was a man raised to believe good luck would meet him halfway, and I would cover the rest. Dad wasn't cruel. He was casual. He believed in stories where his choices had soft landings. Aunt Martha didn't think of herself as an enabler. She thought she was a producer making sure the show went on. I was the quiet CFO of all that production. Every few months there would be a moment that should have made me change the rules. Christmas when I bought Dad a new set of golf clubs and he posted a thank you to Ryan for arranging everything. A summer dinner where Martha told the table a story about me crying at 12 as proof that I'm still dramatic at 32, and everyone laughed like it was harmless. Ryan looking at my watch and saying, "Must be nice," while requesting another transfer for a bridge expense. Tiny cuts you learn to breathe around, but breathing around cuts is how you miss a wound. Callie kept me honest. She'd text Water's sleep screenshot like a mantra. And 2 weeks before the gender reveal, when we were going over timelines for vendors, and I was printing extra copies of contracts because venues always misplace something, she said, "If they joke about your boundaries, check what they get when you keep none." That sentence met me where love and math live in the same cell. I also have a habit that turned into a lifeline: consent and documentation. Massachusetts is a two-party consent state, so I don't record audio without permission. If there's a camera, someone in charge signs off. I ask for it in writing. It's annoying in the moment and priceless later. For family money, I keep everything boring. Confirmations, memos, device alerts. I use two-factor on financial apps, and I read login notifications not because I'm paranoid, but because marketing trained me to respect logs. Logs don't lie. People do. Now about the Urus. On paper, the arrangement was justifiable. He'd be an occasional driver listed on my policy with mileage caps we discussed, and a location-sharing toggle we both turned on. In practice, Ryan treated the car like a tour laminate. It was parked in his driveway, photographed at his lunches, tagged by friends. I asked for odometer updates. He sent photos late or not at all. Insurance expects you to update them when an occasional driver becomes the primary one. Lenders expect the titled borrower to be the primary user. Those weren't abstract rules. They were conditions I ignored because family. That gap between paper and practice is where lenders get to move fast once you stop paying under counsel and show violations. I didn't know I would need that leverage, but my future self was already building it. Looking back now, the HELOC was foreshadowed too. Dad's house is in his name. Any legitimate line of credit would require his signature, and if I were a co-borrower, my explicit verifiable consent. I never gave it. What I did do, as the de facto tech support of our family, was help set up his online banking years ago. I told him to leave e-statements on and to keep the mailing address consistent. He turned paperback on because he likes envelopes. Later, I would learn how a 30-day mailing address switch plus a forged signature can create a window where disclosures miss the right eyes. But at this stage, it's just context. My name had become a passcode in their heads. On paper, it isn't. Jessica is the reason there was a timeline rule before there was a crisis. When you feel gaslit, she said facts are an oxygen tank. So we started a shared note with a simple template: date, what happened, who was their follow-up. Not emotional scorekeeping, just a log. We added silly things too, like Aunt Martha's party themes and Ryan's shifts in business model descriptions from week to week. It kept us grounded and unintentionally trained me to narrate events exactly when it mattered most. The last week before the party looked like every family production I've ever carried. I flew into Boston, went straight to the Seaport venue, and did load-in because that's the job no one names, but everyone expects. The general manager handed me a vendor badge and, when I asked, gave written permission to mount a battery ring cam in the service corridor so trays and equipment could be tracked off the guest path. I label everything. I over-communicate. I also eat after everyone else is fed because I was raised to think chairs at the table are earned with sweat, not birth order. That mindset keeps events running. It also keeps unhealthy systems alive. Then came the one more thing texts. Dad with a tax bill he forgot to mention. Aunt Martha with an upgraded floral invoice to match the skyline. Ryan with a request for a last-minute content crew he promised would pay off. Looking back now, those 3 messages were the sacrament of our pattern. The patriarchal shrug, the producer's escalation, the golden child's pitch. My response was the ritual too. Sure, I'll handle it. This is important. I am not telling you I was a doormat. I am telling you I was a builder. I built a working family out of favors and deposits and late-night phone calls. I built stability with wires and grace. The problem with building alone is that no one else learns how to carry weight. The problem with paying every invoice is that no one else sees the cost. So when my chest tightens on a service hallway later, and my father's voice will dismiss what my body knows it won't be an isolated cruelty, it will be the purest expression of the story we've been telling each other for years, that my job is to absorb, to smooth, to pay, to keep breathing, no matter what. Part 1 gave you the frame. The seaport rooftop felt like a commercial. Sunset gold, string lights, a skyline that makes people say this city out loud. I was in the service corridor with a vendor badge around my neck and a checklist on my phone doing the invisible job that keeps visible moments pretty. The venue manager had signed off on the battery ring cam, so it watched the hallway where deliveries came and staff slipped through. I had set it for motion-triggered clips. Video with incidental audio, not court evidence. Context, insurance for trays and timing. That distinction matters. The first breadcrumb was stupid and small. Martha's Instagram story. A slow pan of the skyline and then me pale lugging cases of sparkling water. Caption, CEO of drama with a wink. People laughed at it in our family chat. I put my phone down. Another vendor had arrived, and timing eats feelings when you're the one in charge. Breadcrumb 2 came 10 minutes later, fast and mean. I bent to adjust a crate, and my chest felt like it caught a wire. Sharp on the inhale, heavy on the exhale. Not panic, not dehydration, something else. I stepped into the service hallway, leaned on the wall, and tried to land a breath that didn't land. Ryan walked by, pressed 2 fingers to my wrist like he was a doctor in a TV show, and smirked. Here we go again? Martha popped her head in and said, "Powder your nose, honey. You look half dead on camera." I said I can't breathe. My father's voice slid in from behind me, conversational as golf. Quit faking it. I remember thinking 2 things at once. That sentence is going to age badly. And the camera got that hallway. Another breadcrumb. Overheard because the universe sometimes does you the favor of being obvious. On my way back to the floor, while I was willing my lungs to behave, I passed Ryan telling a friend she'll pick up the tab. She always does. He wasn't whispering. He wasn't ashamed. It was a law he'd never had to test. Then, the moment that cracked the room in half. Someone yelled for EMTs. The tone changed. Get the stretcher now, cut through the DJ's playlist like a blade. The hallway tilted. Hands were on my shoulders. Jessica's face swam into focus. We're going to the hospital, she said, and because she knows me better than anyone, she added, I'm logging the times. Timeline rule, date, time, amount, who said what. She squeezed my hand and kept talking so I could follow her voice out of the panic and into procedure. In the ambulance, a paramedic clipped a reader on my finger and another band around my arm and spoke to me in numbers. Breathing shallow. Heart fast. We're here. We're moving. I held on to Jessica's voice and the numbers like they were a rope. I could feel the edges of my life pressing in. People use the word dramatic for that feeling when they've never actually had to bargain with air. At the ER, the doctor said 3 words that made time thin out. Pulmonary embolism, then 2 more. Fatal if delayed. They moved me into a room that smelled like bleach and purpose. Catheter-directed therapy. Monitors talking to each other. I stared at the ceiling tiles and counted them. I will always remember the number. Later, I would request the patient summary and the EMT run sheet. The screenshot with the oxygen saturation in red would become one of the calmest pieces of proof I've ever held. While I was stabilized and half awake, the next breadcrumb hit my phone because boring systems save you. I have credit monitoring tied to my own email, separate from my father's accounts. At 9:42 p.m., I got an alert: new hard inquiry reported. Lender type, home equity line of credit. I blinked at the screen until the letters arranged themselves into a sentence I could understand. Someone had used my name to try to borrow against a house that isn't mine. I couldn't do anything from a hospital bed except screenshot it and send it to the shared note Jessica and I keep. She typed back 3 words. We saw this. When I could breathe enough to sit up, I opened my banking app and ran a quick search on memos. Family reimbursement. Vendor. Delivery. Across the last 10 days, 3 transfers totaling $1,700 had moved to Ryan's account. The timestamps overlapped with event prep. None of those amounts matched invoices I had in my vendor folder. This is important. I had previously sent regular support transfers, so nothing about the mechanism was illegal on its face. What changed was intent and timing. The labels were false, the amounts were padded, and one of those transfers had processed while I was sedated. Jessica had my phone at the hospital. I had not authorized anything. I screenshotted everything. I didn't call the bank yet. I built the file first. The cousin breadcrumb arrived with a sting, a message from a number I barely recognized. "You didn't get this from me." Attached were screenshots of the extended family chat. Martha had posted her story. Someone, an in-law, typed, "She always makes it about her." Another replied, "Should have let her sleep it off." Then the line that knocked the wind out of my freshly treated lungs. "Honestly, if she stopped breathing, it would save us all money in the long run. Time-stamped. Names visible." I didn't cry. I didn't even shake. I saved the thread, exported the chat, and wrote the exact time into the timeline note. When people show you what your life is worth to them, believe them the first time. I texted Callie from the hospital bed. Her reply came back in 1 minute like a checklist I knew by heart. Breathe. Save everything. Freeze credit next. No confrontations. Build the sequence. She knows my job and my family. She also knows what happens when emotion outruns proof. I asked Jessica to take a photo of my hospital bracelet with the date and time and to upload it into the folder with the credit alert and the transfer screenshots. We didn't need to be dramatic. We needed to be thorough. Sometime after midnight, the venue manager called Jessica to check on me and apologized for how the night had turned. She also confirmed something that mattered for the rest of this story. Yes, I had written permission to mount a camera in the service corridor. Yes, staff were notified. Yes, they'd hold the security footage on their end as well. Jessica wrote that into the note in plain language. Consent documented. In the morning, when the room calmed and the doctor rounded with the kind of steady tone that reassembles you, I tested my voice and asked basic questions. What happened? What do I need to know? What does recovery look like? Dr. Kwan explained clot risk complications and the one sentence that would stop every gaslighting attempt cold later. When someone says they cannot breathe, you believe them. I asked if he would be willing to say that to my family on a call once I'd signed consent. He nodded. Of course. Here is where suspicion turned into certainty. It wasn't just that they minimized a medical crisis. It wasn't just a cousin's cruel joke. It was the stack of evidence on my phone that said my name had become an instrument. The HELOC inquiry, the mislabeled transfers, the normalization of me as the walking contingency plan, the confidence in the hallway. She'll pick up the tab. She always does. The system wasn't fraying. It was working exactly as designed, and it almost killed me. So I did what I do when a campaign goes sideways and a client wants to spin. I built a deck, except this time it was a folder. Timeline at the top. Hospital and EMT docs in one section, financial records in another, screenshots of the group chat and the IG story in a third. The ring clip labeled clearly as context. Not legal. Context. I kept my notes dead simple date asset action source. I wrote "do not argue" at the top of the page and underlined it. Before noon, I called Alvarez, the attorney. A colleague swore by for financial crimes and identity issues. I didn't try to tell her my whole life. I told her what mattered. Medical crisis minimized in public. Credit inquiry for a HELOC I did not authorize. Transfers under false pretenses while I was hospitalized. Title and loan in my name for a vehicle used daily by someone else. Written permission for a camera that captured the hallway context. I asked for a consult. She said, "Bring your documents. We will walk through steps, not feelings." I hung up and looked at Jessica, who had stayed without my asking because that's who she is. We had built a timeline to survive family jokes. We had accidentally built a case. And standing there in a hospital room that smelled like bleach and purpose, I decided I wouldn't try to win anyone's heart back. I would protect my name. Morning in the ER felt too clean for what had happened. Antiseptic in the air. A monitor ticking like a metronome that refused to rush. Sunlight on the floor in a hard rectangle. Sensory overload happens in small squares like that. You notice the shine on a tile before you let yourself notice the sentence the doctor said the night before: pulmonary embolism, fatal if delayed. I asked for clarity, not comfort. Dr. Kwan walked me through what my body had just survived and what recovery would require. Then I signed a HIPAA consent so he could speak in front of my family. 2 hours later, we got on a video call. It was Jessica, me, my father, Aunt Martha, and Ryan. The doctor's tone was neutral and exact. When someone says they cannot breathe, you believe them. No qualifiers, no jokes. He explained clot risk and discharge orders. He said I'd be okay if I rested and followed the plan. The screen was quiet. I didn't try to fill the silence. That was layer 1 of the reveal the surface betrayal named and neutralized by a professional. The she's dramatic narrative could not survive a clinician with charts. Layer 2 went deeper and less noisy. Before lunch, I had a consult with Alvarez, the attorney, a colleague recommended for financial crimes and identity issues. I told her exactly what I knew, nothing more. Medical crisis minimized in public. A new hard inquiry for a home equity line of credit with my name on it that I did not authorize. Transfers labeled reimbursement and vendor that didn't match any invoices while I was hospitalized, and my phone was in Jessica's hand. A luxury SUV financed and insured in my name, with an occasional driver who had become the daily one. A hallway clip that captured context but wasn't my legal anchor. She nodded as I talked organized, then laid out steps without drama. We opened a police report for identity theft and obtained a case number. With that number in hand, Alvarez called the lender that pulled the HELOC inquiry. We asked their fraud desk to place a provisional freeze on the application pending verification. They confirmed in careful corporate language that an application listing me as a co-borrower had been submitted and that a temporary mailing address change was on file for the property owner around the same window. They did not share IP specifics, and I didn't expect them to. What they did provide was a ticket number, a point of contact, and a list of documents they'd need to validate signatures. The notary log would be requested formally. We didn't need it that minute to stop motion. This is important. I'm not on the deed to my father's house. Any legitimate HELOC would require my explicit consent if I were truly a co-borrower. I never gave it. The freeze bought us time for the paperwork to prove that simple fact. Next, we spoke with my bank about the Zelle and Venmo transfers. Alvarez didn't promise miracles. Person-to-person transfers are hard to reverse when the account holder authorizes them. But we had something specific. I was sedated during one transfer. Device login alerts didn't match my usual pattern. Timestamps overlapped with hospital records, and we had a fresh police report for identity theft. The bank opened their own fraud case, flagged the transactions, and asked for device and IP logs. We provided the hospital admission and medication records to show I couldn't have initiated anything at those times. We didn't argue motive. We proved opportunity and access. Quietly. In sequence. Then we called the auto lender. Alvarez kept it clinical. Title and loan in my client's name. Policy in her name. Borrower listed as the primary user by contract. Evidence suggests the occasional driver has in practice become the primary one. We will be ceasing payments under counsel due to ongoing fraud concerns, and we are requesting voluntary asset recovery to preserve collateral while we reconcile usage violations. We provided exactly what they asked for: copies of the finance agreement, insurance declarations, and public posts showing location and daily use that contradicted the original arrangement. No theatrics. Contract language travels farther than righteous anger. I ate the sandwich Callie had Grubhubbed to the hospital and pulled up my family support spreadsheet. Layer 3, the pattern clicked into place like I'd been building toward it without knowing. 2 years of help tracked down to the day. Roughly $14,000 a month off my net spiking during events and milestones. Dad's property tax dumps accompanied by winking emojis. Aunt Martha's temporary gala deposits that never got reversed. Ryan's late-night client dinner requests that always became sunk cost. It wasn't the amounts that broke me in that moment, it was the shape. I had trained everyone to treat my earnings like a public utility and my goodwill like a bottomless line of credit. The rooftop hadn't created that behavior. It stripped the paint. The system underneath had been there all along. I pulled the pieces into a single folder and gave it a name that kept me calm. Timeline. I promised myself I would argue once on paper. I labeled assets clearly medical financial communications context and added a short note to the ring file venue permission on file. Massachusetts two-party consent respected, for context and sequence only. That sentence kept me honest when I wanted to use that hallway moment as a cudgel. It was leverage in a conversation, not a star witness in court. The star witnesses would be my charts, my logs, my contracts, and my doctor. This is where the breadcrumbs you've been collecting click together. The IG story that called me CEO of drama earlier. It wasn't just rude, it set a tone that justified ignoring symptoms. The audio of my father saying, "Quit faking it." It wasn't my case. It was the cultural cover my family used to keep the system running. The cousins' group chat screenshot about saving money if I stopped breathing. It wasn't a stray cruelty. It was motive written out loud by people who thought the thread was private. The credit alert. It wasn't random. It was the moment the family's imagined access to my name tried to turn into a signed line of credit. The mislabeled transfers. They were the financial teeth of a dynamic that had always eaten quietly. In the late afternoon, Dr. Kwan called back for the family follow-up I requested. I stayed on mute, except to confirm I had consented to him explaining the diagnosis directly. He repeated the sentence that would travel with me into every conversation that followed. When someone says they cannot breathe, you believe them. You do not get to relabel that crisis as personality. He answered a few questions about recovery timelines and ended the call. No scolding, no shame, just medical facts in a calm voice. It did more to close the gaslighting loop than any speech I could have given. I messaged HR next, not to litigate family drama, but to document my medical leave properly and ensure my projects were covered. Separate track. Clean boundaries. The LinkedIn post about accountability and listening would come later as a professional reflection, not a subtweet. I had learned the hard way that channels matter. Internal for operations, public for principles, legal for consequences. Before the day ended, Alvarez sent me a short checklist. Freeze credit with all 3 bureaus. Change passwords and enable stronger two-factor on banking and email. Pull my credit reports to identify any other inquiries in a 2-year window. Document every contact attempt from family and route anything substantive through counsel. I did the unglamorous work first. Phone calls, forms, screenshots saved with dates and file names. It felt like cleaning a kitchen after a fire, pointless until you see the counter appear. When the ward quieted and the monitors settled into their night rhythm, I stared at the same rectangle of sunlight now turned gray and thought about the sentence I have lived with since childhood, make things look easy. The revelation was simple and heavy. I had made survival look easy for everyone. I was done performing ease. I would perform accuracy. That is a different show. I didn't go home and explode. I opened my laptop in the hospital, ate the sandwich Callie sent, and built a plan with Alvarez that ran on documents, not adrenaline. Step 1 was perimeter. Alvarez filed an identity theft police report. I froze my credit with all 3 bureaus pulled. A tri-merge report changed every banking and email password, strengthened two-factor, and shut off every family support autopayment. Not dramatic, just a closed valve. We stopped the HELOC attempt next. Using the police case number, Alvarez called the lender's fraud desk and requested a provisional freeze on an application listing me as co-borrower. They confirmed an application existed, restored the standard mailing address, opened an investigation, and asked for signature verification materials and the notary journal. I'm not on the deed to my father's house. Any legitimate line would require my explicit consent. I never gave it. The freeze enforced that fact. For the mislabeled Zelle and Venmo transfers, Alvarez said expectations reversals are rare when the account holder authorizes them. Our angle was different. Several transfers were time-stamped while I was sedated, did not match invoices in my vendor folder, and showed login activity outside my normal pattern. We provided the police report, hospital admission and medication logs, and device data. The bank opened a fraud case, placed holds on disputed amounts, and began device log analysis. A few provisional credits landed within days. Others stayed under review. No victory laps, just leverage. Then the car. Title and loan are in my name. By contract, the borrower is the primary user. Evidence showed the occasional listed driver had become the daily one. Under counsel, I ceased payments and requested voluntary asset recovery to preserve collateral while usage violations were reconciled. We offered a neutral surrender location and window. In parallel, we informed my insurer that the listed usage had drifted, so my file reflected the correction. Paperwork speaks a language, feelings don't. I kept channels clean. HR got a short medical leave note with documentation and a coverage plan. No names, no family drama. Public would be for principals later, not for subtweets now. Meanwhile, I organized a single folder called Timeline Medical EMT Run Sheet. Discharge Summary, Dr. Kwan's written note with my signed consent. Financial transfers, bank case numbers, credit freezes, tri-merge. Communications exported family chat screenshots with visible timestamps, the IG story saved properly, my HR confirmation and context, the venue's written permission for the service corridor, ring the hallway clip labeled context only, and the venue manager's email confirming consent and retention of their security footage. Every file had a date in the file name and a one-line purpose. If a stranger stepped in, they could follow it. We scheduled a family Zoom for Thursday evening. Massachusetts is a two-party consent state, so we didn't record. Alvarez took contemporaneous notes and circulated a written summary afterward. She ran it like a work meeting, medical facts, financial discrepancies, vehicle usage, and next steps, boundaries. She started where no one gets to argue. A concise recap of Dr. Kwan's diagnosis and orders attached with my written consent, and one sentence, when someone says they cannot breathe, you believe them. She moved to the ledger. My family support spreadsheet summarized cleanly 2 years of dates and confirmation numbers, then the bank case IDs and the overlapping hospital timestamps. No motive claims, only access and opportunity. On the HELOC, she described the suspension tied to the police report, noted, "I'm not on the deed," and outlined the lender's signature verification process. Motion stopped. Process engaged. For the car, she kept it contractual borrower duties, documented misuse payments, ceased under counsel voluntary surrender set for Friday dawn at a neutral lot. She read the surrender window and moved on. We didn't play the hallway clip. It's context, not a courtroom exhibit. Reactions followed choreography I could have written. My father tried misunderstanding, then went quiet when the EMT numbers came up. Ryan rotated through denial, bargain, and blame. That HELOC is Dad's thing. We can fix this in-house. You made money the center of everything. I kept my answer short. I'm not negotiating. Support ends. Surrender is tomorrow. Communicate through counsel. Aunt Martha called their group chat jokes gallows humor. Alvarez read the line about saving money if I stopped breathing and let the silence do the work. The meeting ended with a summary email, bullet points, dates, next steps, and one boundary line. All future communications to Stephanie should go through this office. Friday at dawn, the voluntary surrender happened exactly as scheduled. No drama, a secured lot, a clipboard, 2 men in windbreakers. Ryan wasn't there. He'd dropped the keys the night before at the designated spot per instructions. The driver checked the VIN, took standard photos, and winched the Urus onto the flatbed. A neighbor recorded, as neighbors do. I didn't share it. The lender emailed a receipt asset recovered account protected pending review. That paper was the only audience I cared about. By midday, the HELOC lender sent its suspension letter application, frozen pending signature verification address restored docket number, assigned no advances permitted. The bank issued provisional credits on the cleanest disputed transfers and escalated the rest for device log review. Every message had a case number. Every case number was a brick. Only then did I publish the LinkedIn post I'd drafted a lighthouse piece about listening and consent. No names, no subtext. Families and offices both need one rule: when someone says they can't breathe, you believe them, and when you act on someone's behalf, you get consent in writing. A few colleagues reached out quietly. A contact who'd been helping Ryan stepped back. Physics, not vengeance. 90 days later, the noise was gone. The HELOC application formally failed signature verification and was closed. The lender kept the address fixed and sent a final letter I dropped into the timeline folder. The bank reversed a portion of the transfers tied to the hospital window and kept the rest under dispute. The vehicle account settled into a boring status I could live with. Counsel still buffered all communication. Attempts at end runs, cousin diplomacy, sentimental voicemails wrapped around asks went to Alvarez and nowhere else. Life got simple. I moved into a small seaport place with clean morning light and kept my New York apartment for work travel. I returned to my VP role on a documented plan, then accepted a Boston-based CMO offer where I put boundaries in writing on day one. Clarity scales better than heroics. Chosen family, replace the committee I used to finance. Each month, Jessica and Callie come over for receipts night. 3 questions. Where did we overextend? What did we ignore? What needs a boundary? We write it down and set reminders the way we would for any other deliverable. It isn't dramatic, it's maintenance. If you're where I was, here's the part that actually holds. Keep one folder with dates in the file names. Separate channels: internal for operations, legal for consequences, public for principles. Ask permission in writing before you record anything. In a 2-party consent state, context files stay context. Freeze credit early. Don't argue intent. Prove access and opportunity. And believe people, including yourself, when you say you can't breathe literally or metaphorically. I didn't win anyone back. I didn't try. I protected my name, my credit, and my lungs. Consistency did the rest. And that's the sound of freedom when the room finally goes quiet.